Welcome to BoxPressRadio. I am sitting here with Mr. K from Ventura Cigars. He is the former brand manager. He recently got a little bit of a promotion, and let's jump right into it, Mr. K. Tell me why I'm calling you that, because I've been calling you Kevin in my head all day.
You can call me Kevin. You can call me, hey, you, that jerk. It's his fault, whatever you want to call me. But the Mr. K story is actually pretty funny. I was down in Nicaragua, and it was my first trip to Nica. And, I was a little freaked out by the whole thing. I never really traveled internationally. I'm sitting in the factory's head office. We're sitting there, and we're doing introductions. Hey, this is Joe. This is Frank. This is Kevin, and this big, tall Cuban guy. I mean, he's like 6'2", older guy. He's been smoking since he was like 3 years old. Goes, I know you, you're Patrick, and I know you, you're Frank. What is your name? And I'm like, I'm Kevin. And he goes, Kevin. I can't say it. Screw it. You're Mr. K. It was perfect. Awesome. It was perfect. I didn't have a nickname up to then, and then that one kind of stuck. So that's what I've been going by.
That's kind of awesome. When I think Mr. K, when you said that initially, I was like, so were you like a school teacher and then you got into cigars? That's a weird transition.
Right. Well, that's actually really funny that you say that, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Okay. So I mentioned just a minute ago that you are the former brand manager. Who are you now?
I am the director of marketing for Phillips & King. Most of your listeners probably don't know Phillips & King unless they own a retail shop.
Right.
P&K is the largest wholesale distributor of specialty tobacco products. That's anything OTP, cigars, and pipe, and even vapor products. So we reach all 50 states, and they created a marketing job, a whole marketing department, and then by surprise, and they said, we want you to run it. So I moved up to this role. I still have creative control and some control over Ventura Cigar Company. We got a guy who came in who's got a lot of years of experience, who's going to now manage some of the blending and branding side of VCC. But my role has expanded, and it's a good thing. Overall, it's a very good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're thrilled about it too. I mean, getting a raise and a promotion is always a good thing, or typically a good thing.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited. This is P&K is a fantastic company. It's a family company, and we serve family businesses. We share a lot of the same values. This P&K sales force is 50 people strong. We got people on the phones. We got people out in the field. It's a phenomenal opportunity, and it's something that's been sorely needed at P&K, and it was a fantastic choice to jump in with both feet, and I'm excited, man. It happened like 30 days ago, actually. I'm looking at my watch. Almost 30 days ago, exactly.
Wow. So, yeah, that's absolutely very recent. And you mentioned, the guy that stepped into your former position, he had, worked with the tobacco and blended previously. That's one of my favorite things when I talk to people in the cigar industry. It's always people that kind of start and then move up and, start getting their hands on bigger pieces of the puzzle. It's always kind of just fascinating to see that and how people stay in the industry. So one of the things we always do on the show is we talk about how you got into cigars, and then for industry professionals, we like to talk about, what drew you to actually work in the industry.
Well, my story is very interesting. Sometimes I start this story by saying I was born a poor black child. And fans of Steve Martin, you're going to get that and you'll laugh. But
yeah,
I had never intended to be in cigars, in tobacco. I actually started out my career very young as a Sunday school teacher, and I was on track to become a reverend. I stopped that and made a complete course change and went back to school for business and finished up my schooling and started working for a really big company, and then they laid me off and I worked for a really tiny company, like 7 people.
Uh-huh.
But it was always in marketing. and it was always on the digital side too. So it was I never dealt with hard goods, CPG stuff. I never dealt with any of it. And I was looking for a new job, a new role, kind of closer to home, because I live out by the beach, but I was commuting like 85 miles round trip every single day. A lot of guys do, right? I mean, it's you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And this job opportunity popped up in this little town, and I said, you know what, I'll take a look at it. It was for a social media guy. So I signed up. I said, I'll do this job. I can do it. And they threw me in. And one of the companies I had to rep for, because the company I work for is pretty big, was Ventura Cigar Company.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any social presence at all. I think they had 26 followers on Twitter and maybe 15 fans on Facebook. And I guarantee you 99% of those people were friends and family.
Yeah, and that's almost worse than not having one.
Oh, man, I tell you. Ventura Cigar Company was started like a year before I got here, and it was really kind of like a more traditional type of a company. It was started by a guy who worked for General Cigars, an older gentleman, and he was making a very traditional style company. And he said, you know what, I want to retire. I want to hand this off to somebody, and they brought in a guy, Patrick Hurd from Canada. At the time, he was 35. And he goes, you know what, all this brown, all this gold, all this black, I want to get rid of it and make something completely new. Yeah. And at the time, he and I connected because he's 2 years older than I am. We connected. We started doing some cool campaigns together, on Facebook. One of the things that we did that completely blew people away, Dan, was we gave away 5,000 cigars.
Oh, wow.
In Cigar Aficionado. I don't know, maybe some of your listeners will recall this, but I believe it was in July of 2012.
Okay.
We put a spread together in CA that it was like center of the book, log on to Facebook. I think it was log on to Ventura Cigar Company, which then redirected you to Facebook. And we put a like gate up. And if you liked us, then you got an opportunity to receive 2 free cigars from Ventura Cigar Company, this no-name little cigar company that came out of nowhere. And I think we got 5,000 likes in about 10 days.
So what you're telling me here is you guys took the crack dealer approach. And
we totally
first
did.
Hit's free.
First hit's free, man. And
I like it.
we actually, I don't know, some of your listeners will probably know Two Guys Cigar, Dave Garofalo. They were very gracious, and they said, we'll do the fulfillment, because we're a big company. We serve B2B. We serve businesses. Yeah. We don't ship directly to consumers. So they said, hey, you know what? We'll do the fulfillment. You send them to our website, and we'll send out the cigars. They can order them through us. We crashed their website 3 times in one weekend. Yeah, and they're a big company. I mean, they're able to manage a lot. They have scale too. They can scale out.
Yeah. That's impressive.
It was crazy, and it really is. Let me ask, a group of people.
When you came on, what were the lines that you guys were sending out? Was it what I have here in my hand, the project and the Psycho, or?
No. Again, these were very traditional blends. We had Estilo Cubano. And we had Pura Sangre. Estilo Cubano is like this medium-bodied cigar with a little pigtail cap.
Okay.
From Honduras. And then Pura Sangre is a Nicaraguan puro from Nicaragua, of course. And both of them were blended by Nestor Plasencia.
Okay.
And again, but
it sounds pretty good to me.
They were actually pretty fantastic. I mean, the Estilo Cubano has a 90 rating in Cigar Aficionado, and it had a lot of accolades. And the great thing about Estilo is it sold for like $6 at retail. Yeah. So you're getting a 90 rated cigar for $6. It just doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, that's pretty hard to do.
Yeah, but again, the packaging was kind of boring. A lot of brown, a lot of gold. And Patrick just said, I want to change everything. So we had couple successful campaigns that we ran, and we were at Big Smoke in November of 2012, and we'd been drinking like all day, and it was probably like 11 o'clock at night, and he looked at me and I looked at him, and he's like, hey man, I really want you to run the marketing for Ventura Cigar Company. What do you think about that? And I went, yeah, man. I didn't even think about it. I was like, sure, that sounds great. Let's have another drink. Let's celebrate. So we came back, and when all the dust settled, we realized we had to completely change everything about VCC. We had to change what our logo looked like, change the website, change who we were positioning our products with, change, reorient to who we were going to communicate to. Right. And that was a big change. I mean, organizationally, people had latched onto Ventura Cigar, and we were snatching it away from them and giving them something completely different. But in January of 2013, so it took a couple months, we had a new logo, a whole new look, and by March we had a new website, and we had 2 brand concepts, which you have in your hand right there, which is Project 805 and Psycho 7.
Yeah, so that brings me to a really good question. That's an excellent transition. First of all, I actually do want to mention, as a graphic and web designer, I absolutely love the logo design that you guys have. It's extremely versatile, and I really appreciate that. Really impressed with it. But one of the questions that everybody asked me when I reached out and said, hey, what do you guys want me to ask them? The question I kept getting was, how the hell did you guys come up with Project 805? And, the Psycho brand, like they're 2 very distinct, separate brands. And, when I see Project 805, I just picture this really unhappy guy sitting there with 804 half-burnt cigars next to him, and then the light coming on at 805. Absolutely.
And yeah, essentially that's what we wanted to convey. It's the whole Edison theory, right? After 1,000 attempts, he's failed, and somebody asked him, you're going to quit now? He goes, no, I just figured out 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb.
Right.
So we're here. We want to kind of convey that. The reality is, Project 805 and Psycho 7, we were in such the early stages of this transition, that I said, I want to make 2 completely different cigar brands and see which one grabs hold. And if they both do, fantastic. And then that gives us multiple opportunities to reach out to people.
Right.
Project 805, the 805 has multiple meanings. One of them is what you had talked about. It's the 805th blend. But 805 is also where we come from. 805 is our area code. And Patrick was like, hey man, I really want to have 805 as one of our names for a brand. And I'm like, sure, man, let's work it in. So, Project 805 and Psycho 7 and all the other stuff that we're coming out with, I guess we can talk about that in a little bit, but all of it really kind of revolves around this whole thing of these are the cigars that we would smoke. We're not sitting here just saying, oh, yeah, bring us a bunch of blends and we'll just slap a name on it and ship them out. Right. I think we all know that there's guys in the industry who've done that, and they're not that successful. And there's other guys who do, and they get some success, but we're not those guys.
Yeah, once in a while you hit the lottery, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. I have to say, when I first smoked the Project 805, I don't know if I was just too new to cigars to really understand it, or if I just had a bad palate that day. I really didn't like it the first time I tried it. And one of my rules is to always smoke 3 of something.
Okay.
So I smoked 1 or 2 others, and I kind of started to come around, and then I've been smoking so many other cigars, I never got back to it until I started, smoking a bunch of your stuff, prepping for this interview. And I was just sitting here smoking a Project 805 before you called in, and I'm like, man, this cigar is just growing on me more and more every time I have one. I think it helped that I did the Jose Blanco blending seminar.
Okay.
And I'm thinking more about what I'm smoking and trying to pick out the flavors. But I'm really enjoying the depth of flavors in it. I'm really impressed with the complexity that's in this cigar.
Yeah, so Project 805, your experience is not unique. Project 805 has that andullo in it, and andullo is it's not really necessarily a type of tobacco. It's more like a tobacco process but there are only certain types of tobacco that they would use for andullo. And andullo is endemic to the Dominican Republic. But there are andullo types of tobacco all over the world. Venezuela has its own, Chile has its own, the Amazon basin has its own type of andullo, and it's a primitive way of processing tobacco. And the type of andullo that we put into Project 805 is a South Dominican andullo, and it's very strong. It has an interesting flavor characteristic. Some people call it raisins, other people call it figs.
A sweet.
I call it earthy sweetness is what I call it.
Yeah.
So, and it's only about 7% of the actual filler blend, but it adds so much flavor and complexity to it. It almost seems like it's more. The guys who really enjoy Project 805 and the Project 805 Maduro are those guys who've been smoking for a while. And you've developed a palate, because some guys, if you're not a big smoker and you smoke maybe once in a while, or just haven't smoked for a very long time, you come to and you smoke that cigar, this is your first cigar ever, it's going to come off as a little bit harsh. It hits the back of the throat, back of the palate. It's a little bit strong. It can give you a head rush if it's the first thing you smoke, like in the morning or whatever.
Right.
And some people don't necessarily like that. Now, for those guys who've been smoking for a while and they've smoked almost everything under the, to find a cigar that has a type of tobacco that nobody's ever used in premium cigars before, because we were the first ones who came out with it in 2013. That's something unique and different. And it really does attract those guys, your older smokers or those guys who smoke 3 or 4 cigars a week, sometimes 3 or 4 cigars a day. I'm guilty of it.
I would if I could.
Well, let me help you out with that. I'll send you some more cigars. But it really does attract those guys, and they come back and say, man, that is so unique. And that's who's buying Project 805, and that's really who's attracted to it. And it is, much like yourself, I was kind of like, hey, this is okay. But over time, it's really become, I've brought it into my regular rotation. One of those cigars I gravitate towards when I want something that's a little bit more complex, something that, again, you want to take your time smoking it. Because if you smoke it fast, you will get that head rush, because that andullo will burn hot, it'll burn strong, and it will give you that nicotine rush.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic blend, and thank you so much. I really appreciate the compliments.
Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest, I mean, I remembered when I had smoked these previously when I started talking to you guys, because I actually really like the Psycho 7, and then I was like, oh yeah, they make the Project 805 also. I was like, oh man, I hope that that's better than I remember. And then I smoked one and I was like, yeah, this is better than I remember. And I just got more and more excited because I was like, man, I'm really excited to talk about this cigar, because a lot of my friends kind of had the same experience, and not all of them do the same thing where they're like, I'm going to smoke 3 of these even if I don't like it.
And most guys won't give it a second chance. Yeah,
I'm really, really happy to be able to, share some of these with friends and say, try it again. Look for this.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing I really notice with it is on the retrohale, I really do get that earthy raisin flavor in my nose, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, so the retrohale is really important, and again, not being in cigars for a very long time, but having smoked since I was about 22, what I understand and what I've been told by some pretty big names in the industry is, you smoke a cigar and you kind of let it linger on the palate, on the tongue and in the mouth for a while, and you get, I think I was told like 4 different distinct flavors, maybe 5.
Yeah.
A little bit of salt, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of smoke, whatever. Now, when you retrohale, when you actually blow out that smoke through the nose, you have an opportunity to pick up upwards of 4,000 different flavor notes. And that's where, again, where that more, the smoker's been doing it for a while. He understands that, and he'll pick out some of those nuanced flavor and notes that really sets Project 805 apart, as well as Psycho 7. Psycho 7 is no slouch in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So, before we get too far down the path, I totally forgot to do one of the things that we love to do on the show.
Okay.
My favorite question to ask somebody when we first have them on the show, if you can, do you remember the very first cigar that you smoked?
I do actually. That's funny. Yeah, it was a Rocky Patel box press vintage.
Wow.
And I got the darkest cigar I could possibly find. I walked into the humidor. It was actually a John T's in California. John T's, I don't know if you guys have them out there. And this is kind of like a flashback for those like guys who are like 30 plus. But John T's sells like novelties and like curious things and weird things, but they also had a humidor. Like, it was like an actual, honest to God, walk in 10 by 10 humidor. And I walked in there, and I didn't know what the heck I was going to buy some acid, because I didn't know what acid was, but it sounded very intriguing. And I said, hey, man, I asked the guy working there, I said, hey, man, what's the strongest cigar you guys have here? And he kind of looked at me like, oh, yeah, this guy's going to throw up. And he walked over, and he grabbed this, pulled it off the shelf. This is one of the best in the humidor. I said, fantastic. And I went home, I turned on the hose, and I started washing my truck. And I lit this cigar up, and I'm washing my truck while smoking this cigar. And I never smoked cigarettes my whole life. I had smoked some Swisher Sweets here and there. This cigar knocked me on my ass. I almost fell over one time when I was trying to like get the fenders. It was it was such a weird experience.
Yeah, you get a little nicotine drunk.
Yeah, totally, man. I'll never forget that experience, because then I went back to the humidor. I said, what do you have that's not the strongest cigar here? And what I ended up smoking, what he handed me, what I ended up smoking on a regular basis and buying boxes of, was the Excaliburs. Fantastic cigar, phenomenal blend, very mild. But I have 3 original cigars from my first box in my humidor. They're probably bland as ever, because mild cigars tend to get more mild as time goes on.
Right.
But yeah, I still have them. They're in my humidor at the house, in one of my several humidors. But yeah, that was my first cigar, and it was a great experience.
That's very cool. You absolutely have one of the most memorable first cigar stories that we've had, and detailed. But yeah, I kind of had a similar experience when I first started smoking, cigars and wanted to actually smoke cigars, because I went and tried one with a friend for his birthday, and smoked Acid Blondie or Cuba Cuba, and honestly didn't think too much of it. And then, like 3 years went by and I got my interest peaked again. And I smoked a Padron, was one of my very first cigars.
Nice.
So I kind of started pretty strong and kind of never shied away from the strong cigars, ever since then. So it's been a lot of fun. And I'm a fairly recent, cigar smoker. I only started maybe 2.5 years ago at the most. So I'm fairly new, but we have a very large cigar club here in Fort Wayne. We have about 40 constantly active members, and we have 20 to 30 guys that show up every month to our meetings. So we have a pretty good community, and having 5 cigar lounges in town, that doesn't hurt either.
No kidding.
But yeah, I mean, I started listening to podcasts and listened to, I think Blowin' Smoke had a couple of your sticks. I was not particularly fond of the episodes they had those on.
We all know, if we've heard them, we all know what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean, they absolutely weren't fans, and I was kind of, put off by that, because I enjoyed the cigar, and they were just really dismissive of it. And that was actually, I remember specifically, I was going out to go hunting with one of my buddies, and I listened to that on the road driving there in the morning. I was just like, okay, I guess I'm done with this show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think I've listened to them since. But, I mean, I'm glad they're doing it. I don't want that to sound negative more than it needs to. I'm glad anyone is doing podcasts. We advocate everybody making a podcast. Just because it's so much fun to sit around and just chat like we are.
Yeah, and Dan, I mean, I'll tell you, look, we're on Reddit, we're on the forums, we're constantly, talking to people out there, influencers, and I see the good, the bad, and the ugly about our cigars.
Yeah.
And everybody's cigars,
and you need to.
you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, this isn't directed at them or anything, but the reality is we appreciate honest feedback on all the cigars. Again, we're trying to make cigars that we would smoke, not necessarily the cigars that those guys would smoke.
Right.
And when they say, hey, man, it's not that good or it's crazy or whatever, you know, that's honest.
Well, and that's fine, but you always want to know why. I hate it when people just say,
sure.
this is good or this is bad. Why is it good or bad? That's so important.
And in a way, what it does is it spurs on conversation and it's a little bit of argument. And as long as everybody stays civil, I love it. I love that type of honest, I didn't like it, you know, and give us a reason. I mean, that's nice too. You know, it's always nice to have that. But, you know, an honest conversation about the cigar. I mean, I remember a recent post on Reddit where the guy on our cigars, some guy reviewed Psycho 7 and just said, I don't know what all the fuss is about. He didn't even say it was bad. He just said, I don't know what all the fuss is about. It's not for me. And I jumped in there and I just said, hey, man, you know, really appreciate you being honest and saying it's not for you. We have some Psycho Maduros. Why don't you try those? He smoked them and was like, this is a great cigar. So maybe he's not a mild to medium fan. Maybe he's more of like a medium Maduro guy.
Right.
I don't know. But again, not everybody's palate's the same. Not everybody's expectations are the same. And we love the conversation and we love the influencers out there, man. It continues the conversation, like I said.
So speaking of which, one of the things that you guys actually sent out before the show, I got some cigars, some hats, some cutters, and lighters, and then there was one thing that when I looked at it, I'm like, did they really just send me beef jerky? And I opened it up, and I'm like, this is definitely not beef jerky. So there was no description with it. There was no name or anything with it. Can you tell me what it is? I mean, can you tell the listeners?
For sure.
I hope
maybe you guys could put a picture of that up on the side or something. But right there, that's Andullo tobacco.
Okay.
And that is what is in Project 805, and that's what makes it special. And it does look like beef jerky, and it doesn't smell like it, of course. But it has this. It's a very thick, veiny, oily leaf. And I can tell you what it is. It's called Amarillo Parado. That's the type of tobacco. And it's got that earthy sweetness that we had talked about. And what I can do, Dan, is I can send you some photos of what it looks like out when they're making this tobacco, so that way you can share it and have some content out there for people to look at. But essentially, when they process the tobacco, instead of putting it into big pilons for the fermentation process, which are like these gigantic piles of hands of tobacco,
right?
They put it inside a palm seed husk,
which looks
that's
awesome,
about
by the way,
6 feet long. Yeah, it's crazy. And they wrap it with rope and they just let it set for 2 years. They don't turn it. They do open it up and then they rewrap it. That's all they do. And what you get is this very dense, it weighs about 25 pounds, 6 feet long, very dense grip of tobacco that traditionally, before we came along, what they would do is they would take a machete and then they'd shave off like little pieces of it.
Right.
And they would either dip it or they'd put it inside a pipe and they'd smoke it out of the pipe. And really, it's kind of like a natural Red Bull because it is such a strong tobacco. It would kind of give you like a little energy boost. And guys out in the fields, again, because it's an agrarian society, especially a couple thousand years ago, because that's how long they've been smoking Andullo. Guys out in the field, that's what they would, enjoy instead of having like a lunch to take with them. They'd smoke Andullo or dip Andullo. And then, of course, in the culture, in the older culture, they do chicken fights. And they take the dip juice and they spit it into the face of the chicken and it gets the chicken all crazy. So it's kind of like a performance enhancing drug for chicken.
Nice.
But that's what that is. That's Andullo, and we use it in Project 805, and it's something different. Definitely something different.
So I have to ask because I mean I've talked with my friends and I kind of went down the whole internet rabbit hole of researching this ridiculous beef jerky looking thing that I got in the mail. So I have a bit of an idea, but if somebody else gets a hold of one and they want to try it, would you recommend putting it in a pipe, and how would you recommend doing that?
So I've done it both ways. Now, putting it in a pipe is a fantastic way to enjoy it, especially if like you just want to try that andullo. Just get the essence of andullo out of it. So get a grinder, like a real good sturdy grinder, and grind that to a very fine grind, almost like a cotton. Like you just want to try to get it as fine as possible.
Okay.
Put it in a pipe, tap it down, and just put a real light flame on it. I would even use a cedar spill if you're going to use anything, and just puff it, and it's phenomenal. Again, it's strong, but It is phenomenal. Dipping it, I'd cut it into strips that are about an inch long or so, and just put it between the lip and gum. Don't swallow the juice, and it's a fantastic either way, whether you smoke it or you dip it.
Right.
It's a fantastic hangover cure.
So if I were to have a superpower, my superpower would be I don't get hangovers.
Oh, that's a great superpower.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky. I went through college, and where I went to school, we actually had a 24/7, 7-day-a-week schedule. So I would have classes that would run from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. and then 5 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Holy crap.
Yeah, we were sponsored by Red Bull, Starbucks, and Monster.
And the city of Miami, which is built on cocaine.
Yeah, and we were real close. We were in Orlando.
My goodness.
Yeah, so I did drink pretty heavily, and we would drink through the night and go straight back to class. And I was the only person that would just never had a hangover, and that's where I discovered my superpower. But I'll have to get one of my friends to drink a little too much and then give them some of that and see how they do.
Definitely, and report back. Like you should do like a whole video and
Yeah, we'll do like a video series.
Very scientific about the whole thing. That sounds like a university for the cigar industry, to be honest with you. I did go to college. I went to grad school. I haven't drank as much or partied as hard anywhere else in my life, and I'm Irish, as I have in the last 2.5 years in the cigar industry. I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to see whether or not they have a superpower.
Right.
Or if they want to see if their liver can take the abuse, because it's like day after day, week in, week out of insanity. It's great, and I love it. I love every bit of it.
Yeah, I'm always impressed when I hang out with reps, whether it be Ben from Drew Estate or Miguel formerly from Tarano, currently of Duran. I'm impressed by those guys just being out on the road and, hanging out at the shop and drinking, or, going out with us after an event and drinking. I'm always like, and you're going to get in the car and drive 3 hours the next morning. Or even the same day if they're not totally drunk, it's absolutely it's a fascinating industry, and I've never been a part of an industry that's so positive and happy. Everybody has a good time.
I tell you this. I've been in different industries. I was in banking for a while. I was in digital media distribution for a while. And your competitors were just that. They were competitors.
Right.
And you fought with them every single day. I came into the cigar industry with just a real high-level understanding of, the different players. And after I've been here about 6 months, what I realized is we're all friends. And in some cases, we're all family. I mean, there's guys that work for one company or started a company, and their cousin or their uncle or their brother runs another company.
Mm-hmm.
You nailed it right on the head, Dan. This is the most collegial. This is the most friendly. This is the most welcoming industry I've ever known of. And I thank my lucky stars. I fell into this job, as you know from my earlier discussion. I have friends who are firefighters, police officers. One guy, he works for the FBI or CIA or something like that, and they all want my job. They're like, you're such a jerk, man. Why don't you share? Why don't you bring me on? And I'm very, very lucky, and I highly recommend it to anybody out there.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely am one of those people that covet your job, because every time I sit in one of those 4-hour marketing meetings and then I check my phone and I see, Miguel or Eddie Ortega or somebody like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just sitting at a meeting lighting up a cigar. I'm like, yeah, I really hate you. Like, I wish I was.
Yeah, we have one of the only office buildings in the state of California where you can smoke in.
Yeah.
That's one of very, very few.
Yeah, it's, that is one of the interesting things. I don't want to dwell a whole lot on the current state of tobacco laws, but one of the interesting things I like to talk about, we have a fairly new establishment in town here that had to get around some really new stiff laws. In Indiana, you can't open a new smoking lounge or have smoking in a building where there was not previously a smoking establishment.
My goodness.
So you can't buy like an abandoned McDonald's and open up a cigar lounge. It has to be a previous cigarette shop or something of that nature. We had one that actually opened for 3 months before being reported, that people were smoking indoors, and they actually were closed down. And one of the most recent places, Rudy's, they actually got around it by buying a house that was zoned, for commercial buildings afterwards. And they opened a cigar, wine, and chocolate bar downstairs, and then a premium members lounge in the second story. So the way they got around it was they made all the members part owners of the apartment upstairs, because you can smoke in your own house.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really just kind of fascinating how people are becoming so creative and inventive. There's a passion for it. And I was blown away because they charge, upwards of $700 for a membership, and they're full. It's absolutely an incredible industry, and people are so passionate. I sat down with two guys that had just moved here. One guy had just moved here 2 years previous, and the other guy had been here 11 years, and they had moved from, I want to say Kenya, but it's not. It's another, an African country. I can't think of the exact location. But two of the nicest guys that I've ever sat and smoked with, and I know they're listening. They were unbelievably excited to find out that there were podcasts for cigars. They had no idea. And just the nicest guys. And they had just recently, really, really gotten into cigars. And it was just so unbelievably cool to sit there and hear these guys talk about their passion for cigars. And I was like, have you guys ever smoked a Padron Anniversary? I was actually sitting there smoking one, celebrating my birthday. And they're like, no, we've never tried one. And I'm like, give one a shot, thinking they'd grab, a petite Corona size Anniversary, the 1946 number 6, I think it is. And, the guy walks out into the humidor and comes back in with, two of the Churchill size. And, I was like, okay, now you're going to make me feel bad if you guys don't like these. And they're like, no, man, we're just excited to try it. And they loved it. I mean, they knew exactly what they liked, and they told me. And that's just one of the great things about cigars, is it's almost like wine, where people are able to articulate what it is that they like in a cigar. And it's becoming one of my favorite things to identify the flavors and talk about those with people. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you, I know obviously you're smoking a lot of your own product and what you guys sell, because that's a big part of the job. If you're not smoking your cigars, what are you smoking?
I do smoke our stuff. Part of that is a QA function, right? So when we get a new shipment in, we open up a couple boxes, we smoke those. But for the most part, I already know that our stuff's good and I already like it. And again, I'm constantly looking for new, interesting, weird, wacky, and wild things. A lot of the stuff that I smoke are test blends that we're working on. I got one in my hand right now. It's a little strong, but it's fantastic. So I'd say maybe 70% of the time I'm smoking some no band, test blend from a factory. Now when it comes to smoking other people's stuff, man, I smoke everything I can get my hands on. I'm just like any other fan or consumer, I always like something new. I always look for something with either a little bit of a story behind it, like you had mentioned the Padrones. I bought a box of Padron Little Hammers. The phenomenal cigars. I mean, it's just,
They are.
you just really can't overstate how impressive that cigar is. The price is impressive too.
Yes.
But it's definitely worth it, and it's an every once in a while cigar.
Right.
I'm trying to think, what have I smoked recently that I was really impressed with? Let's see, what did I light up? I recently smoked the Liga Privada from Drew Estate, which was fantastic. And I smoke them every once in a while, but it's a great cigar.
Which one?
What's that?
Do you remember if it was the 9 or the T52 or
It was the 9. Yeah, it was the 9.
Yeah, that is the one that I really like. I'm not a huge fan of the T52. It's got a weird kind of almost a tea flavor in there that I'm just not a fan of. But the 9, myself and just about everybody I talk to can't get enough of them. And every time I go up to Kalamazoo, they have a tax limit of 25 cents a cigar, so I can buy number 9s for $10 and I get really excited.
For sure, that's a fantastic price.
Yeah, it is. And when I tell people like from New York about that, they're about ready to stab me in the neck.
They want to slap you, yeah.
Yeah, instead they get in their car and drive to Kalamazoo instantly. But yeah, I mean, you're right. There are just so many out there. It's almost impossible to remember the cigars that you smoke because there's such a variety. And that's been an absolute joy for me. It's kind of like, I look at it like food really, like what am I in the mood for today? And it's taken me really 2 years to get to the point where I can, look at the construction of a cigar and get an idea of like, oh, this might be the flavor that this has. And even still, sometimes I'm totally shocked for good or bad.
Yeah, for sure. When I go back and I smoke some of the cigars that I really liked when I first started smoking, again, the Rocky Patel, the Excalibur, and I started smoking. I smoked so many different things. It's kind of funny because I came across a box. I was just cleaning out the garage over the weekend. I came across a box with all my original bands that I had. And these I kept in my truck because I would smoke in my truck when I was on my way to a job or whatever. And I came across National brand, which is some it's a value cigar. I think it's from Nicaragua. And I came across some Alec Bradley bands from the early days of AB, some early Pete Johnson stuff. And what's cool is to look back and be like, wow, these guys, they've been slinging it out. They've been slugging it out in the trenches now for years and years and years. And their stuff has just gotten better and better and better.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned, the cigar humidor and the store environment, Dan. And I kind of want to talk to that point. Cigars are not a commodity. And there's a lot of people out there because the price is a big deal. Especially when you're younger, it can be a pretty expensive habit. Or, you can buy online. A lot of guys do that, but that store environment, being able to sit down with guys and some gals and sit there and talk and smoke and enjoy and have a couple drinks and try new things and trade. You bring in 4 cigars with the intention of smoking one. You walk out with 6 or 7 cigars because there's a guy in there who wanted to trade you or give you 2 for 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
That is such a cool and great environment. It really speaks to, the industry as a whole, but the people who make up that industry are some of the most fantastic people I've ever met. I mean, there's people, I remember I was at a cigar event and I was really tired and I had 3.5 hour drive ahead of me. And the guy who was running the event, his name's Doc, he offered me to stay at his house. You know, I mean, who does that? I'm a stranger to him. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he's like, dude, you're tired. You probably shouldn't drive. Why don't you go ahead and you could stay over and we'll make you breakfast. And that's not the first time I've had that offer. I mean, Lincoln Salazar from Cigar and Spirits magazine gave me the same offer. It's a 2.5 hour drive from his office to my home. And these people that make up the industry, guys like you, guys like Rocky, guys like Jonathan Drew, and all of the people surrounding them. They're some of the most phenomenal people, and that's who comes to the shops. And those are the guys who are sitting down. You got old guys in there who've been smoking for 50 years, and you got new guys in there who've been smoking for 15 minutes. And that makeup, that push and pull, that give and take, the conversations that happen, the level of experience and inexperience, really make this a really cool industry. And you know, as I look back and I looked at some of those cigar bands and some of the conversations I had, I mean, I sat down. I remember when I got accepted to graduate school, I smoked a cigar. I remember when my sister got married, I bought a box of cigars and I handed them out to everybody. Yeah. I remember when my first kid was married, we had a cigar. I had like 17 people over to the house. We smoked a cigar. When my second kid was born, we had a cigar. It's one of those things where you come together, you share, and there's guys that come together like on their first marriage or their first divorce. You know, they'll sit down and they'll share stories, have conversation, and really it's less about the cigar and more about the occasion.
Yeah, you know, one of the you know, most memorable conversations I've had was actually with a store owner, or a store manager rather. They recently converted a local cigarette shop into a cigar lounge, and they really were struggling. And every time I would go in there, they always wanted to talk about how difficult it is, you know, to compete with the 4 other stores in town on their prices. And, you know, online is just killing our business. And they were just always super negative, and they seemed to always want to talk with their customers about that. And I said, you know what, let's sit down and talk about this. You know, I don't come here because I'm hoping to get a deal. I don't come for the 2-for-1 bin. I come here because I want to have a good experience with people. Yeah. I want to sit down and I want to talk with somebody new that I've never talked to before, or a friend that I only see when I come here, or a friend that I meet here every weekend. You know, I come here for the people. If I wanted to go, you know, buy a cheap cigar, I'm going to go online, because you're right, you can't compete with that. What you have over them is you have the environment. You have the people that are coming into your store, and, you know, your cigars are going to sell themselves. You really don't have to do too much work there other than actually having them there. You know, when you go into a shop, like you just talked about, you go there to, you know, talk with the new cigar smoker, or the guy that's been doing it since, you know, Cubans were legal, you know.
Right.
The shop that I go to every week that's 5 minutes from where I work, is the first place I started buying cigars locally. And it's a super small store. It's one of 3 of the same business. And the 2 employees are father and son. And they completely manage and run the store, just the 2 of them. And it's so unbelievably cool to sit there with the father, who's been working since, I think he's been there like 68 years.
Wow.
And it's just unbelievable to hear the stories that he has to tell from, you know, back before cigars were a popular thing, and talk about the transition in the 90s when they blew up. It's unbelievable to hear those. And then, you know, alternately, I sit down with his son, who's been there 20-some years, I think 26 years. And I sit with him, and he plays PS3 Black Ops. And we hang out and talk about video games and smoke cigars. You know, you get that juxtaposition that you just really, you don't get anywhere else. You don't see that other places. You know, and that is one of the fascinating things about cigars today, as opposed to, you know, even 10 years ago. We just talked about this at length with Jose Blanco, how it's unbelievable to him to come to a cigar event with 25 guys, and the average age is about 30.
Yeah.
You know, there's guys like myself, I'm only 28, and I think the oldest guy in there was like maybe 60. If you went back 10 years, you might be lucky to have a guy in the 40s in there.
Right.
You have a lot of younger guys that are really into branding. They're really into what's cool. And then you've got guys that just want to smoke good cigars. It's not the guys that just come in and buy the same thing every single week.
Yeah, and you make a really fantastic point. And that group of smokers that's coming into the industry, they're our age. I mean, I'm 35. You're 28. So, we're the Gen X guys, I mean, I'm at the tail end of Gen X. You're more like a Gen Y or like a very early millennial. This is my marketing guy coming out now.
Yeah.
And when we repositioned Ventura Cigar, that's where we wanted to be, was in that group of guys who were looking for something different from what their father smoked. And what I told everybody, and again, with my limited knowledge in the cigar industry, but my background with marketing, I said, guys, what we want to do is have really cool packaging, but really fantastic cigars. So the first, the box and the bands and all the stuff that goes along with that can sell the first cigar.
Right.
You can sell one cigar with a cool box or a cool band, but the blend is what sells the box. So the guy comes back after buying one cigar, giving it a shot, and he goes, that was one of the best cigars I've ever smoked. I'm willing to plunk down $200 or $150 or whatever it is on a box of that cigar because I want the box. Yeah. And then along with it goes the branding and all the marketing and all the work that you put into it. But it comes down to what is in that cigar.
Yep.
And, and that's why when I'm smoking, 70% of my smoking, like I said, is other blends. New things. What can we, because we do go through, 805 obviously is a stretch as far as how many cigars we smoked, how many different blends we smoked.
One blend, yeah.
But it could, honestly, it could be in the hundreds by now because I will smoke tons of cigars every week. My group of my trusted guys here and my guys out in the field who I trust, any day of the week with a new blend. They smoke all kinds of stuff for us and they give us their honest feedback. We want to have a phenomenal blend that's kind of holds up that packaging.
Right.
And nowhere is, I think, more evident than in Psycho 7. Psycho 7, 7 different tobaccos, 6 different countries. The group that makes Psycho 7 for us hadn't ever put that many different types of tobaccos into a cigar before. And they've been blending for a very long time. And they said, well, we'll try it, sure. And we asked for a multi-country blend. So this is your best tobaccos from Peru, your best tobaccos from Honduras and Nicaragua, and the U.S. There's actually a little bit of Pennsylvania Ligero in there. Mm-hmm. And we have a Mexican binder on the natural, and we have a Mexican wrapper on the Maduro. Psycho 7, cool packaging, funny branding, interesting, kind of draws you in, like, what the heck are these guys doing? But the cigar is phenomenal. Of course, I would say that, right? Because I'm the jerk behind it, but
that's the cool thing about the cigar industry. Just because it's your brand, that actually almost emphasizes the fact that it's going to be a good cigar. You're not going to continue to work at a company that's producing something that you don't like as long as you've been there. That might be fine for one or two might not be exactly what you like or your taste. But, when you're able to really talk passionately about your product, that almost sells it more than, anything else you can do for that cigar.
Yeah, you're right. And I'm just one voice, though, and what we've seen is this fanatical upswelling, just groundswell of support from all this, like, not all, but a lot of the cigar blogs, a lot of the websites. Cigar Aficionado gave it a good rating, and that helps. And some of the other cigar magazines, Cigar and Spirits, Cigar Snob, Cigar Journal, they give it good ratings, but really it's your audience. It's the guys out there who take time out of their day to post something up on Cigar Federation, put something up on their website, or mention it on their blog or their podcast, like you're doing. These are the guys that we are very, very fortunate to be involved with, but they're also kind of the guys that we make cigars for.
Right.
These are cigar geeks, and we want to make sure that we're coming out with blends that are really, really good. And oh, by the way, like the ad in Cigar Aficionado is unlike anything you'll ever see in Cigar Aficionado.
Right.
But that's kind of like that's part of the puzzle. But the biggest piece really is that blend being fantastic and hitting the right spots on the palate and ensuring that you want to come back for more.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. You want to get the branding to do its job as branding and get people to try it, and then you want the quality to get the guys to come back and buy the box. Which, it's fascinating that we talk about that. Just this past weekend on Sunday, I was in a shop in Michigan City, Indiana called the Golden Leaf, where they have a really interesting location. They're between two casinos and a high-end shopping center where people are train bussed in from Chicago to shop. And they go through more Opus X and more, just Davidoff and, all, the Julius Caesars of the cigars than anybody else in the country does currently, I believe. And I sat there and I smoked a fairly new cigar. It was a EP Carrillo La Historia, I believe.
Oh, great cigar.
Yeah, I didn't even make it in the door. The guy knows me now at this point because I always walk in and they always have the newest stuff. I didn't even make it, through the doorway, and he's handing me one of these saying, "You're going to smoke this." And,
nice.
I sit down with another guy and I'm like, "What are you smoking?" He's like, "Oh, the same thing you are. I didn't hardly get through the door." And I'm like, "Yeah." And, he finishes his cigar and he's like, "All right, I got to get out of here." And as I'm sitting there, I hear him go up to the counter and say, "Hey, how many of those do you have?" And he bought the rest that the guy had. I think he walked out with like 3 boxes of them. I think that's the first time I've actually seen that happen, and I was kind of blown away. And then as I finished my cigar, I was kind of angry at the guy for buying all that they had. So,
Ernesto Carrillo, man, EPC, they have the larger ring gauge brand, the Inch. And I smoked it for the first time at IPCPR last year. And I'm not a bigger ring gauge guy. I don't like the 60s, though we make cigars in 60 ring gauge. I tend to shy away from those.
Yeah, I'm in the same.
But I'm going to tell you, and for your listeners out there, if you guys can get your hands on the EPC Inch, which is a 64 ring gauge cigar, it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the few 60s that I actually buy pretty frequently. Really, that and the Asylum 6x60 are about the only cigars that I buy in that ring gauge.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And, Ernesto, he's like one of those like master blender guys. And I believe he blended that cigar for the ring gauge. And this is something that I didn't know coming into cigars, but I learned over just the process of smoking different sizes and different blends and one blend and all these different vitolas. Size does matter. Sorry, guys, I have to tell you, size matters. A larger ring gauge cigar in a certain blend is going to smoke differently than that same blend in a smaller ring gauge. So your Coronas and your Gordos, while maybe the same tobaccos in the same ratios, are going to taste different. And, not strikingly different, but in some cases, it's a pretty big difference. When we're doing our blending and we're going through this whole process, that's one of the things we keep in mind. We'll order up 10 different vitolas, and sometimes only 3 of them make it. Because again, it's the size and blend matter. And Ernesto nailed it with the Inch, man. I mean, a 64 ring gauge cigar that's a monster to blend for because your wrapper has to be perfect. Because wrapper, and most of your listeners probably know this, but wrapper makes up a significant portion of the flavor of the cigar.
Yeah, and it changes everything inside as well.
Absolutely. So, I mean, he absolutely nailed it, but that really harkens back to his understanding and his masterful craftsmanship and his understanding of how the tobaccos work together, how they burn together, what's that first third, what's that second third, and if you can get it, what's that last third going to be like, and that whole experience all the way through in a larger ring gauge. It's a challenge, and only really he could pull it off the way he did. And it's, I tip my hat. Hopefully he's listening or somebody, but Ernesto, well done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We talk about that as well. I'm going to keep saying this because I'm really having a blast talking with you about it. When somebody blends a cigar, like you had just mentioned, there's that first, that blending process where you kind of blend for a specific size to begin with. I wish when I go and I look at what makes up a cigar, one of the stats along with, the countries of origin of the tobaccos, the flavors, the available vitolas, one of the things that's always missing that I wish was there is what size it was initially blended in, because in my experience, that tends to be the one that I like the most, because it seems like that's the one that, that's where they got the flavor that they were going for. And then everything else, they try to get it as close as possible, but it's impossible to get it 100% accurate when you're adding in a whole extra leaf in some cases.
Correct. And I mean, I'm a marketing jerk, I'm not like this master blender, and I would never even pretend to be, even on Halloween, I wouldn't go as one. But I can tell you, being around some of the, the top names in the industry and just having the opportunity to talk with them and be around them and watch them doing their master craft, these guys typically, and this is kind of like a little insider, they typically will smoke their first cigar that they roll in a Corona size. And sometimes they'll move up to a Robusto, but oftentimes it's in that Corona size. So if you can get a Corona, either whether it be a larger Corona, like a 46 ring gauge, or, standard Corona, like a 42 in that area, that's typically the best version of that cigar. And, right now the younger group, the guys are kind of like new to the cigars, those 27, 28, 29-year-old guys, and maybe even guys in their 30s. But when they're first coming into cigars, they gravitate towards that larger cigar, that big ring gauge, 60, 70, and if you can handle it, an 80 ring gauge cigar. And that, while it looks cool and you feel like, big pimpin', it's not necessarily the best representation of that blend.
One of the mistakes that I keep hearing a lot of people, say out loud, which always shocks me, but I guess it shouldn't, is they see the bigger ring gauge and they think that has to have more flavor in it because it's bigger. And that's actually exactly the opposite. You're getting so much more of that flavor concentrated in like a Lancero or a Corona.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my favorite lines when I pitch the smaller, because we have some smaller ring gauge cigars, is a lot of flavor in a little package, much like myself.
Yeah, I don't think I can claim the same thing. But my co-host that's not with us tonight, Andrew, he will appreciate that. We're kind of Mutt and Jeff when we stand next to each other. He's about 5'10" and I'm about 6'3". And, it's kind of interesting to talk about that. He likes the bigger ring gauges and I like the smaller cigars.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's so much fun. That's one of my favorite things about cigars, just like wine or food. Everybody has their own taste. And even if I don't like something, it doesn't mean that you're not going to like it. And it's a lot of fun to discover that. And that's kind of, one of the things that go hand in hand with the culture of trading cigars and cigar bombs. Guys want other guys to try it. I mean, I'm notorious for going into shops and giving cigars to guys that, own a cigar shop. And they're just like, really? You're giving me a cigar? I have an entire humidor and back room full of them. And I'm like, yeah, but have you tried this one? I just went into the Golden Leaf here in Michigan City, and my friends make fun of me because I'm a huge fanboy of Alec Bradley, for only a few of their cigars. I absolutely can't get enough of the, Nica Puro. It's probably my favorite cigar aside from the Padron right now. And I don't want to hurt your feelings. I really enjoy your cigars, and I feel like, the Project 805 probably going to be one of my daily smokes now. But when I reach for a cigar that I'm like, I need to have a really good cigar today, I'm reaching for a Nica Puro, or I'm reaching for a Padron 1000 series. Just because I know that I'm going to get the exact same thing every time. And in my book, consistency is king. And so far what I've gotten is the project is just, it's really nailing that, where every cigar has a great draw. Every cigar has the same flavors, the same level of complexity, while maintaining that complexity where you get all those flavors.
Yeah, I don't want to break anybody's, burst anybody's bubble or how they think about Ventura Cigar, but maybe it's a surprise, maybe it's not a surprise, but we don't own our own cigar factory.
Right.
We're in the cigar business because we work with quality manufacturers, and we kind of spread the love in Central America between Honduras and Nicaragua and the Dominican Republic. And being part of the larger company, Phillips & King, who sells everything. I mean, we have 15,000 SKUs. This is not a pitch, but we have 15,000 SKUs. So we sell, you can imagine, we have tons and tons of cigars. And,
Right.
And Dan, if you ever come out this way to the West Coast, I'll give you a tour. It's about a 12,000 square foot, 2-story humidor. So we've got a lot of cigars in there. And we're able to choose, because we are a big buyer, we're able to pick and choose the manufacturers we work with. And one of the things I constantly hit on with our management staff is consistency.
Yeah.
There's quality, there's consistency, and then there's service, which you guys don't necessarily see the service side, but some of you do, because, when you go to buy a Psycho 7 or Psycho 7 Maduro or Project 805 or any of the cigars we have, and they're out, they don't have it.
Yeah.
It's because the service somewhere broke down, whether it be logistics or supply chain or whatever. But
they're so good, everybody bought all of them. There's
well, we could say that, definitely. That's what my sales guys are saying to everybody. Well, sorry guys, we're out because they're so popular. But it's quality, consistency, and we are very selective and with who makes our cigars. And Project 805 is made for us by Guillermo Leon's factory, La Aurora, and they're in the Dominican Republic, and they are phenomenal with their quality. Their QA process, and the guy that's running the factory, Manuel Anoa, he's a master blender in his own right. He's a fixture in the Dominican Republic. Going to the factory with him was like going to the Dominican Republic with a rock star. The guy, he's just, he's known because he's a hound dog for quality. If he sniffs out a cigar that's not right, they pull it off the line. They'll pull the whole bunch, whatever. And the Project 805 Maduro is a really good example of this. We were going into IPCPR. Normally, when you launch a cigar, you start like 2 years before the IPCPR target date. We were going, because we're a little bit behind, and we kind of fly by the seat of our pants sometimes, but we were working on this blend with Project 805 and Maduro, and it took us a while. Again, it wasn't right. It wasn't exactly what we thought. So we were changing the ratios of this tobacco and, changing out the wrappers over here. And, we were like kids in a candy store or a hobbyist in a hobby store. We're like, we can do this, we can do that. And we were getting down to the wire. And so we finally settled on a blend. And we chose the Cubra Maduro wrapper, which is a phenomenal wrapper. I'd like to wrap every cigar in it. And they said, no problem. We can choose the final samples, blah, blah, blah. We were 3 months out from IPCPR, and which I'm sure if any of your manufacturers or brand managers are listening, they're probably going, what? Because that's when you usually receive the product in, not when you first put your PO in.
Right.
And I got a phone call. We put the order in on a Friday. On a Monday, I got a phone call from the factory, from Manuel, and he was apologizing to me, and I'm like, oh boy, what happened? The wrapper wasn't right. It just wasn't right. And he said, look, we could do this, but it won't be right.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? And I said, well, first I'm going to pass out, and then I'm going to get up off the floor, and we'll figure it out. So I actually flew to the Dominican. We went to the leaf, one of the leaf providers out there, Domitab, and there's this big guy out there, Martin. You're a big guy. He's a big guy. You guys would get along in big guy land. I'm 5'8", so like a munchkin compared to this. And we walked his gigantic facility, and we found the right bales of tobacco. That La Aurora was the right primings. It was the right tobacco. It had the right amount of aging on it. It had the right color. There's so many different variables here. And I mean, again, I'm the marketing guy, so I'm like trying to understand, like half understand Spanish and half understand what the heck they're talking about. Because even if they were talking plain English, I mean, some of the stuff was over my head. But again, this goes right back to the quality and the consistency that our manufacturers put into, and the pride. They call it in Spanish, it's called orgullo. The pride they put into their product. And, La Aurora stamps their name on the bottom of every box of Project 805 because they're just that proud of it, and they're not going to put their name on something that's not perfect.
Yeah. Hey, let me stop us real quick right here. I need to actually run inside and check on my baby and make sure he's doing good and grab another cigar.
Okay.
So if you want to take about 2 minutes and do whatever you need to do, I'll be right back and we'll continue on with the show.
All right, Dan. Sounds good.
Fantastic. All right, I'm back whenever you're ready to get going again here.
I'm here, man. I just went off, took a leak.
Yep, me too.
Had 2 iced teas and a couple of glasses of ice water knocking at the front door. It's like, I gotta go.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. I was just finished a beer and finished the cigar. It actually had exactly about an hour and a half on it for that Project 805, so pretty good time on it. But so I'm not even really going to cut it much. I'm just going to cut out the break. We just got back, and you mentioned iced tea, I mentioned beer. Are you a pairings guy? Do you like to pair your cigars with beverages or anything in particular?
Since most of the smoking I do is in the office, there's not a whole lot of pairing other than a glass of water that I will do along with it. And that's the majority of my smoking. When I'm smoking for enjoyment, not necessarily for work, I definitely pair. And I'm a big IPA guy. I'm a beer guy.
Okay.
But I'll choose a hoppy beer. There's a West Coast. There's an IPA called West Coast. It's from West Coast. It's called Green Flash. Phenomenal beer. I don't know if you guys have it in Indiana, but it blows me away every time I have it. I'll smoke cigars with that. There's a beer called 805, which is like a middle of the road beer out here by Firestone. I smoke Project 805 with that, and I put a picture of that up on my Twitter. But other than that, other than beer, you'll see me with a nice glass of Macallan or Glenlivet.
Yeah.
And that's typically, and that seems so like traditional, and I know that I'm the guy who's repping the non-traditional company. But there's some traditions you just can't break, and that's one of them. Now, I'll drink it out of a Garfield glass to be completely non-traditional, or my Batman glass. But
nice.
Definitely, Macallan 12 or 18, or there's a limited edition in a yellow box that I really like. Neat, and I'll sit in the garage if it's cold. It doesn't happen that often here in Cali, but I'll sit in the backyard and just enjoy a nice cigar and a nice glass of scotch or a fantastic beer.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'm not traditionally a scotch guy. In college, I drank way too much tequila, but it wasn't exactly the best of it either. I tend to stay away from it a little bit now, but I've recently really got into bourbon. And, yeah, it's kind of become one of the traditions I have where I'm smoking a cigar, and one of the three that I smoke of every new cigar I like to pair with a good bourbon, like a Buffalo Trace or a Bullet or something like that.
Yeah, Bullet's great. Have you had Angel's Envy?
Yeah, we actually just had a conversation with one of the guys in my office. He's a really big bourbon guy, like way bigger into it than I am. And that's like his daily drinker, and I'm impressed because I'm like, what job do you have in our office that I need?
Right, he's kind of defining the career path for you.
Yeah, based on his bourbon.
Based on bourbon.
But yeah, he kept coming up and talking about it, and we do a big convention. We have the biggest convention in Indiana twice a year, and he always is like, oh yeah, I love to go and drink bourbon with store owners, and they pick up the tab, and I can try all these new ones and not worry about how much it just costs me. But he kept talking about Angel's Envy, and I'm like, all right, I don't really want to buy a bottle of this not having tried it. And I found out one of our local liquor stores will let you try anything they have in the store for free. Yeah, which is pretty impressive.
Holy crap.
Yeah, so I walked up and I'm like, hey, I want to try Angel's Envy. And they already had a bottle open sitting on a shelf. Like, they have a full bar basically behind the counter. And there's no like bulletproof glass or bars. So I might have to formulate a plan to knock one over.
Right.
But
it's like the point break of bourbon and liquor theft.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to grow my hair out and pick up surfing, but yeah, I was really impressed with it. And I probably will be picking up a bottle. I got a little bit of birthday money that I need to do something with.
Nice.
And that might become my celebratory bourbon maybe. But I tend to default to Buffalo Trace, so I try to always smoke a new cigar with a glass of Buffalo Trace. And it's kind of become my standard pairing. That and like you, I'm a beer guy. I lived out in Phoenix, Arizona for about a year, and I really hadn't drank craft beer before that point. And we actually stopped at a brewery called Santan Brewery, and I tried their stout. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I tried whatever their stout was, and I was just blown away because the last time I had tried a stout was a Guinness, and I thought it tasted like old cigars and, crappy beer. And now I like old cigars and beer. So
right, there you go. Nailed it.
Yeah, but I really, just kind of default to let's drink this or smoke this with a beer, let's smoke this with a bourbon, and then I like to smoke one with nothing or water. And pairings, I think, are an interesting thing. I don't know that it's really the best thing to do when you're trying a new cigar, but I think it really can take a mediocre cigar and turn it into something really great.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree completely. This is going to be a little bit of a reach, but when I was a kid, my folks had a restaurant. My dad was a chef. He was, classically trained. And he would always tell me, because I'd ask, like, Dad, why are you putting sherry in this? What does that do? I was always just really curious. And he goes, look, son, you have to understand, like, alcohol brings out nuances and flavors that in the food that you would never get if you didn't have that in there. Aside from, obviously the flavors of the alcohol and whatever it is, alcohol has a way of bringing out and enhancing and completely changing the flavor profile of whatever else you're enjoying it with. And cigars are no different. And I agree with you. I think if you're going to try a cigar for the first time, get a nice glass. Don't make it too cold. Nice glass of water. Sit down and just enjoy it. Enjoy that cigar for what it is, right? And then come back and revisit it with different types of alcohol or non-alcoholic drinks. I know there's a couple guys out there, a couple of blogger guys that will, they'll pair a cigar with a soda, like Jones Sodas, which has a phenomenal, group of, different flavors of sodas.
Yeah.
It's cool, right? So, you're going to get, different interesting combinations of flavors along with that cigar. I absolutely encourage it, but definitely your first cigar of that type of that brand, try it. Try it by itself. See what you can pull out of it, and then start pairing it and experimenting.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we always do on the show too, that I want to do before we, forget and get wrapped up in how awesome people are that smoke cigars. We always like to talk about, the person we're talking to and find out a little bit more about them. We want to know, like, what do you like to do when you're not working, marketing, doing, whatever it is that you're going to do at work and you're not smoking cigars? What are your hobbies and what kind of stuff do you like to do outside of cigars?
Great question. My job is it's pretty all encompassing. I spend a lot of time on the road, so when I do have some time off, I covet it, very jealously. The time that I spend away from the industry is typically in one of three areas. We'll call it people, no people,
yeah,
and loud things. So on the people side, that's friends and family. I have a group of guys that I've been friends with since I was like 15. And from like elementary school, and these are guys that, they got my back, I got theirs, and, and these are civil servants, so these are cops, they're firefighters, the whole deal, and, I spend a lot of time with them when I can, I don't get a whole lot of time because they have families too, and that's friends and family. My family's really important to me, especially my kids. I have 2 daughters, and they're young, they're in elementary school, they're insane. I forgot how, what it's like to be a kid, and you get to see it from the other side. And it's cool. So I spend a lot of time with them, and they demand a lot of time as well they should. I'm their dad. And then no people would be, I get out, I have a bike. I have actually 2 bikes. I have a mountain bike and a road bike. And, I know it seems crazy, but, as a cigar guy, you're smoking a lot of cigars, you got to get that cardiovascular working.
Yeah.
You got to get out of the seat, kind of move around a little bit. So I'll do road biking. And I live in Ventura County, so we have a lot of mountains and stuff. So I'll hitch up on the mountain bike, and I'll go 10, 12 miles back in the hills, and I'll just sit there and be quiet and just kind of relax, because so much of my job is social. It's interacting. It's, collaborative. It's nice to just get away. And it's pretty amazing what you don't hear on a regular basis. And like, if you're just kind of like in the city sitting around, you don't get to hear the birds. You don't get to, hear the sounds of nature. And I know this kind of gets a little sappy, but getting out there is cool. It's great to get away.
Yeah, it's important.
And then, loud things. So I like to blow stuff up. I have guns. I have lots of guns, actually. I'm a big gun guy. I shot my first gun when I was 5 years old. My father put a .38 Special in my hand, and I pulled the trigger, and I don't remember the story. I don't remember what it happening, but my dad, what he said was, when I pulled the trigger, the gun pinched my finger. I dropped the gun. I started crying, and he said, "Boy, pick up that gun and fire off the next 4 rounds." And I did, and ever since then I've been hooked. So I've got pistols, and I've got rifles, and I've got shotguns, and I'll grab a group of guys, or they'll grab me, and luckily my group of friends, they're all, they're gun guys as well. So we'll go out and we'll go shooting, and we've got things. I live kind of close to the desert, so we'll go out there, and we have this thing we do twice a year called Man Weekend, where it's just dudes in the desert doing dude things, blowing stuff up, shooting guns, telling BSing with each other. So that's my life, man. I mean, it really revolves around work and then those 3 aspects. And I have a heck of a time doing each one of those things, and I try to do them on a regular basis.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm a similar case with the guns. I'm not necessarily a huge gun nut, to where I don't own a ton. I'm more of the traditional hunter type of gun owner, with the rifles and shotguns. But I do absolutely love to go out and shoot, assault rifles and, what have you. But, I'm kind of in the same boat where I'm always around people. I'm always doing marketing and talking with people, sitting in meetings. If I'm not sitting in meetings, I'm hanging out with friends. I'm going to cigar shops and events. Spend a lot of time going to breweries and doing tastings and that sort of thing too. and just a lot of talking. I get really tired of hearing myself talk. So when I get to go out into the woods and go hunting, it's almost like you talked about. It's almost spiritual the way things are out there. It's so disconnected from what you're used to on a day-to-day basis. And I'm actually really thrilled. Opening day for rabbit season is on Saturday, and I'm really excited to go out and hunt some rabbit. But it's always interesting to hear what people do, that are fellow cigar smokers. It's like, well, yeah, we always have this common thread that we can all talk about, but it's almost even more fascinating to find out, who the person is. Because as we've, shown here, we can sit and talk about cigars all day.
For sure.
But, it's actually really, it's interesting too that you mentioned the weather in the desert. When we lived out in the West, out in Arizona, and we visited California for a few days, my wife and I hated it out there. We couldn't deal with all the people. We both grew up in the Midwest for the most part, and we're just used to the seasons and the few people. I mean, there's no traffic when I go to work at, 7 o'clock in the morning. And when I would go to work at 5 o'clock in the morning in Arizona to get there at 8 a.m., there's, seemingly a million people on the road with me. And we just couldn't deal with it. So one of the things that you guys do have that we don't have here is you have nice weather all year for the most part.
Yeah.
So to tie back into cigars, we talked about the vitolas and the things that, you should try to smoke. This is kind of prime time here for people to start smoking the smaller vitolas again, get into the Coronas, the Robustos, even some Lanceros, because it gets colder than hell here. It was negative 50 with the wind chill, or the wind chill last year, in January.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm actually in my garage right now. I had a smoking room in the house, and after we had the baby, I stopped using that. And it's about 30 degrees right now, and it's pretty chilly, but it's prime time for people to smoke the smaller cigars, and they're a little bit difficult to find because there's this big revolution of big ring gauges right now.
Yes.
And it's driving me crazy. I really can't wait for this trend to be over.
It's like with all things, there's a pendulum, right?
Yeah.
So, you see it in fashion, skirts go long, then they go short, and then they go long again. I think we're back up to that kind of like that mini skirt look, which I like. On the cigars, the same thing, big ring gauges, but it's not just ring gauges, strength, there's guys with like the triple Maduros and, there's really, really strong cigars, and then the pendulum swings the other way. Now people want a mild to medium cigar. The same thing with price. I mean, I've seen stuff in the mid 2000s, so you saw real popular lines of cigars in that $6 to $7 range, and then the pendulum swings the other way, and you got like a bunch of guys with $15 to $20 cigars coming out.
Yeah.
I could tell you that you're right, and you're spot on. The trend right now is in that larger ring gauge size. But we see sales slowing down, not declining, but just kind of slowing down a little bit. And you're starting to see these smaller ring gauge, shorter smokes pop up from well-known manufacturers, because they understand. I mean, there's different guys in the industry that are smoking cigars, and they want different things. But also in the Northeast, in the Midwest, in the wintertime, guy still wants to smoke, and he's not going to smoke a cigarette. He wants something, that's a premium product. So we offer at Ventura Cigar on the Project 805, we offer a petite Corona, which is a 4x40. It's a real small smoke. And it's like, I think $5 retail, something like that, before taxes, of course. And then on the Psycho 7, we have a Corona, which is phenomenal. It's a 5.5x46. And these are short smokes between, like 20 minutes, depending on, how you smoke, all the way up to like 45 minutes, which, I guess after 45 minutes in negative 50 degree weather, you're a popsicle. Yeah. But, definitely,
cigar lights.
Right. but in Psycho 7, we also have a 6x60. So we try to offer, kind of like a nice spectrum of sizes. And that's hard to do because we talked about earlier with, ring gauge and how that affects flavor and stuff. So, but you're right. What we're trying to do again with Ventura Cigar and some of the new brands that we want to come out with is really blend to a size. And I've tasked the new guy, the FNG, with figuring out. I want like a mid-size ring gauge size cigar brand, and then I want a smaller ring gauge cigar brand, and then I want a larger ring gauge cigar brand. He kind of looked at me like I'm crazy, like I have two heads or something. And I just said, look, man, I want to be able to appeal to different groups of guys, but I know that cigars kind of group around a specific size when it comes to the blend. But again, we're a company, we're a business at the end of the day. So we want to be able to make sure that everybody has a cigar that, one, that they like in the size that they like, two, in a blend that speaks to them and to their palate, and three, is priced right. So,
yeah,
we try to offer everything.
You have to offer something for everybody. But at the same time, you do have to maintain that consistency, and that's where you can really tell the good cigars from the bad, is if you smoke one at a small ring gauge and it's great, and then you smoke the larger, and you're like, yeah, this is terrible. That's kind of where I start to, it affects my rating when I tell somebody about a cigar. I hate to do the 1 to 10 review rating, but I do like to talk about the construction, the consistency. I shy away from flavors because everybody tastes something different. I hate it when I go and look at Cigar Aficionado and I see the 90 rating, because for me, when I see a 90 rating, I'm like, okay, well, it kind of depends on whether or not I agree with the taste of the person reviewing the cigar, and you don't always even know who it is that's reviewing the cigar.
That's so true. It's funny because when we talked about Estilo Cubano early on, in Estilo Cubano, the Robusto, it received a 90 rating. And then that was in, I think, 2012. Recently, we got an 82 on the same cigar. Different size, of course, but the same cigar, same blend. I'm not sure how a cigar goes from 90 to 82. Really, I don't understand that. But at the end of the day, it depends, because your point's well taken, it depends on the guy who's smoking it, how his palate was that day, and how they were feeling about the cigar at the time. And there's so much goes into these ratings, construction, draw, flavor, all of that really kind of makes up these ratings. And I would encourage your audience, look at the ratings, but those aren't the Bible. We do have some good ratings on cigars, and of course we want great ratings. But those cigars that are rated 80s, mid 80s, low 80s, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad cigar. Of course, I have cigars and I have a dog in this race here.
Right.
But just kind of look at everything and kind of rate it for your palate, for your needs, and of course your budget. There are some amazing cigars out there, that are $6, $7, and there are some absolute dog rockets that are $20. And I've been surprised. And don't chase the band, don't chase the rating, chase what tastes good to you. And that could be, a factory throwout from J.C. Newman, or it could be a Davidoff white label. What tastes good, what, fits your budget, and at the end of the day, what you enjoy smoking. Yeah,
I mean, we're actually notorious for this topic. We did a kind of a study on Opus X. We had a couple of our cigar club members that picked up a bunch of Opus from a few different local stores. Like I mentioned, we have the luxury of 5 local shops. And we also have probably an additional 6 stores within an hour or 2 of where we live.
That's so great.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, the Mecca for cigars, and nobody seems to realize it. But what happened was we realized 50% of those cigars that came from, 8 different locations in 3 different states, 50% of them were plugged. They were unsmokable for one reason or another, and we're talking about $20 to $30 sticks.
Oh.
So I started, I basically just went to all of these stores over about 3 or 4 months, and I talked with the store owners or the people working, and I said, hey, do you guys get a lot of these coming back? People saying they're unsmokable, they're bad, something off in them, and they said, yeah, you know what, we've had, about half of our cigars coming back from Opus, or Fuente as it were, and we basically reported on the idea that like something is seriously wrong, and we've not heard anything from them yet, and we've reached out to them and said, hey, well, what the hell's going on? The only thing we've seen is they're, maintaining the highest quality standards and whatnot, which of course they have to do. But it's fascinating to see that, something at that high of a price point having that big of an issue. And I don't know if it's the product or if it's a new group of rollers or what's going on, but there's an issue there. And, I guess the point I'm getting at is it's not necessarily telling the price of a cigar with how good of a cigar you're going to get. The $3 cigar should be just as well made as the $30 cigar.
Absolutely, and let me remind you in the audience as well that cigars is a wholly human endeavor. I mean, at every point from when that seed is germinated to the point where it hits the shelf and all the other points in between, and I could bore you guys to death with what I've seen as far as like all the steps, but just suffice it to say there will be 100 sets of hands. 50 people will touch the tobacco that goes into that cigar that you are holding in your hand right now right before you light it. I mean, you're the last set of hands, but there are 100 sets that hit that cigar in every step of the process. Most of your factories out there, the ones that have the big brands at least, are building quality in at every step. But it's a human endeavor. I mean, one guy has a bad day, another guy is just starting on the job, like you mentioned. Or whatever. One guy has a bad day, the cigar could be bad.
Yeah, it happens.
Really but it really is it's a human thing. I mean, the cigar you have in front of you, and I don't want to wax too poetic. Again, this is not a podcast that, as a sleep aid. I don't want to put anybody to sleep here. But it's really, honestly, one of the most fantastic creations you have in there in your hand, because every person has a job. They're a master at their craft. They work hard. They often work for not a lot of money. They're doing it because this is the way that they can gain employment and get a better life in some of the third world countries. And here in the States, guys selling the cigars, guys the reps who are repping the cigars, at every step in that process, there's care built in and quality control built into every step. I mean, when the cigars arrive here, in California, because this is a desert out here, mind you, they come from a very humid climate in Central America or the Caribbean, and they hit our docks, and we have a process to ensure that the cigars get from the truck and into the humidor within just a few hours, and in some cases, just a few minutes.
Yeah.
So, again, that cigar, that Opus X, you were telling me it was plugged, but it could have been. I've had cigars that were totally dried out in one of the most fantastically outfitted humidors, and it probably happened, on the way to the shop, and maybe it was 110 degrees out when the truck arrived, the FedEx truck or whatever, arrived to drop off the product, and maybe the cigars got dried out. There's so many steps in this process that, at any point, if one person drops the ball, the whole thing goes bad, and it's still a miracle that you can take a cigar out of your humidor that may have sat there for a day, a month, a year, or 10 years, and you could light it up, and the thing burns consistently. It tastes great. The quality is there, and you recognize all the little nuances and everything in it, because so many people took their time and care and put their life's work into ensuring that you have that fantastic experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a wholly man-made product. anytime you have something that is custom made, handmade, no machine made product involved, there's absolutely that room for error. And that's something to be mindful of. You know, if you're in a cigar shop and you get a cigar that, you know, cracks open at the last third of the cigar, probably not the best form to go and throw that in the guy's face and say, I need a new cigar.
Yeah.
You know, it's absolutely an adventure every time you smoke a cigar. And like you said, it is really fascinating the way that we can get a product from, you know, essentially another world away and, you know, hold on to it for 6 years and have it be just as good, if not way better, than when you got it.
When I was just kind of getting into the whole industry, I was maybe like 26 or 27, and I had a guy, and what I realized pretty early on, Dan, is, you know, cigars are a great way to, because I had a business at the time, they're a great way to kind of break the ice with a new customer or a prospect.
Yeah.
So I was kind of courting this business, and I had some cigars. I learned that the guy that owned the business was a cigar guy, and so I handed him some cigars, and he handed me an Upman that had been aged 30 years.
Whoa.
And I didn't even want to take it. I'm like, I'm the wrong guy. I mean, it's like handing a McLaren automobile over to a 16-year-old. Like, I'm only going to ruin it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not the right guy. And he looked at me and he goes, you're the absolute right guy. You like cigars. You smoke the cigar. I did, and I wish I hadn't, because if I had held on to it for a few years, I would have really appreciated it. But again, it gets to your point, which is, you know, cigars sitting there, aging all the time that goes into it. I mean, 30-year aged tobacco in my hand. The tobacco was older than I was. And I smoked this thing. And I mean, I remember going, wow, this is a great experience. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty fantastic experience all the way around.
Yeah, it really is incredible. I mean, one of the coolest experiences that I've had with cigars, I started working at the place where I am now, and one of my boss's bosses found out that I was, you know, a cigar guy, and I was fairly new to cigars at the time. One of the coolest things anyone's ever given me, he actually has some sort of weird connection, like 2 or 3 people away, where they work on Air Force One with the president.
Oh, wow.
And he actually gave me one of the cigars from Air Force One. Probably one of the coolest things I've ever gotten. I have no intention of smoking it. And it's in a nice glass tube. It's, you know, I'm sure it's perfect in there. It's fine. But, you know, just, it's kind of one of those very cool things that you don't see a whole lot, where people are excited to give you something so rare, and it makes it that much better that they're giving it away.
You should return the favor, give the guy a bunch of Psycho 7 and Project 805 to kind of like sneak on the plane.
Yeah, I have given the guy quite a few cigars.
Can you imagine?
We do that, yeah. He's like, what's
the chiefs of staff sitting there smoking a Psycho 7 or a Project 805 or one of both.
Yeah.
That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, that would be something to see. But, yeah, so I'm curious. We kind of all were having this discussion recently. So we were at the blending seminar with Jose Blanco, and I keep bringing it up because it's probably one of the best experiences of my life, especially with cigars. We asked him, hey, how do you like to cut your cigars? How should we cut these cigars for the blending seminar? And he's, you know, absolutely, you know, a fan of the straight cut. He likes the guillotine. Now, my co-host Andrew is very much an advocate of the V-cut because he's the guy that chews the shit out of his cigar.
Okay.
He doesn't want a bunch of Scooby snacks in his mouth, and, you know.
Gross.
Yeah, it's not a great taste or a great feeling, but, you know, I'm kind of a straight cut guy myself because when I started out with cigars, I was the moron that was cutting off all the way to where the cigar was straight.
Yeah.
just cutting way too much off, like a whole fingernail length.
Yeah, you were a noob. You're not a moron.
Yeah.
You're just a noob. You didn't know.
was the definition. But I'm curious, do you have a preference, or do you use whatever you have on hand, or what do you do?
90% of the time, I'm going to use my fingernail, and that's not kosher. I know that. But, of course, I work in a company that sells cutters, punches, V-cuts. I mean, we sell everything, right? And you look around and you go, hey, man, you got a lighter? Nope. You got a cutter? Nope. No one wants to go down to the warehouse and get one. So I'll just, I'll peel away a little bit of the cap, and I'll start that way. And I actually learned that, honestly, from the Dominican Republic, where almost nobody uses a cutter. They just kind of peel away a little bit of that top cap, and start smoking. But in mixed company, where I'm expected to actually use a tool designed for that purpose, rather than be a barbarian and just slice into my cigar, I typically will reach for, if I have an option there, I'll reach for a punch.
Yeah, so
and I'll go with a smaller punch. Oftentimes I'll go with a smaller punch because, if it's a good cigar with it's quality constructed and it's rolled properly, even a small punch hole, you'll get a good draw out of it. The smoke will be cool, and you can kind of direct it on different parts of your palate. You get the right amount volume of smoke that you want, and then you can get that fantastic retrohale that really showcases the nuances of the cigar.
Yeah, it's so odd that you mentioned using a fingernail. A lot of the time when I cut a cigar with a straight cut, I try to get as little of the end of the cigar off as possible now. And if I do have a cigar that's not giving me the best draw, if my fingernails are long enough, which I guess is my curse, I have to cut my fingernails about every week because they grow like a woman's. It's actually really irritating. But if my fingernails are long enough, I'll just take, like my pinky nail and dig into the end of the cigar and make kind of my own little punch.
Yeah, exactly.
It actually works really, really well. But, I do tend to get a few of the little debris going on from that. But, so one of the other things that I guess I'm a little bit curious about, do you guys have anything new, or, anything that you can talk about that we can look forward to anytime soon, or anything we should keep our eye out for?
So the season of the new is closed, of course. I mean, pretty much everybody brings out their IPCPR,
Right.
a little bit before. And again, for your audience, not everybody knows what IPCPR is. IPCPR is a gigantic trade show, and it's really just that. It's just a trade. And then, of course, guys like you, Dan, you're welcome to come in as press and social media and digital media. But it is a trade show, and that is where all the retailers show up to talk shop, to see what's new, and they open up their pocketbooks and buy for the rest of the year in some cases. The new stuff, and they try to get deals and all that sort of stuff on existing product. We are in right now full court press developing new blends.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my personal humidor here. It's like 6 feet tall. It's 2 feet wide.
You're just
about
broken.
4 feet deep, filled with cigars, different blends from, all over, Central America, the Dominican and South America. And I'm a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of great here. And I just sat down with some guys from La Aurora, and they're going to send us even more cigars because we were talking about some blend ideas. So while I can't tell you what we're going to come out with because I just simply don't know.
Sure.
I can tell you that we are shooting for 2 new brands in 2015 for a launch at IPCPR. There's a potential of a third brand, a third blend that would come out that would be like kind of like a niche blend. We're looking at that same price point that we've always done, which is the $7 to $10 range. And we want to fill out our portfolio. So, the new guy we brought on, he's right now doing a needs assessment of what we have in our current portfolio and what we should come out with, because we don't want to come out with another mild to medium cigar. We have that. It's called Psycho 7. Right. We don't want to come out with another cigar with a wholly new or wholly unique, because it's not necessarily new, but a wholly different type of tobacco. We have that with Project 805. Sure. So, I tasked him with, find the holes in our portfolio, find where the taste, flavor, where people want to buy a cigar, what's important to them, find that, and let's fill the holes. And so we're looking at, box press stuff. We're looking at, darker cigars, which are not necessarily stronger. Maduro is Spanish for ripe. So we're looking at some Maduro, wrapped cigars. Mm-hmm. We're looking at a more mild cigar, which, is good for those guys who smoke on a regular basis, or who, like me, tried a super strong cigar and went back to a mild cigar. We're looking at all different options here, and we're in that process now because we're kind of late. It's October. We're going to start whittling down what it is that we have and start making some decisions on those blends. But I really wish I could make an announcement on your podcast here, but I can't at this point.
Oh, no. Well, and I figured as much, but, I did have a lot of people asking me, hey, find out if there's anything new. And the IPCPR is a sore subject with me. No fault of anyone else's, but my son was actually due very close to when the IPCPR was, going to be happening.
Oh, it's a tough choice, man.
Yeah, I was
and you made the right choice. You came to IPCPR.
Yeah, I'm kind of starting to think so. The lack of sleep makes me regret it a little bit. So, I actually very much could have went and not missed anything. I would have been back for a couple weeks before he was born. Yeah. But it was close enough, and we had a lot of issues. So I didn't want to be away for too long, and I needed to save up some of my vacation to take when he was born. But I was unfortunate enough to have the entire trip paid for and comped and everything. I was supposed to be going for a local store here and helping picking out the cigars that they were going to stock this year. So I was very much disappointed I did not get to go, but I'm hoping to go this next year, even though I'm not the world's biggest fan of New Orleans.
Yeah, they do move the trade show around. So, it was in Vegas for 2 years. It was in Orlando, I believe, before that. Now it's in New Orleans. IPCPR is a crazy place because it's all your cigar guys, your manufacturers, your major manufacturers, everybody from Rocky to General to Altadis, and your smaller guys who are trying to make a splash and trying to make an impression. They're all there. And, the trade show opens at, I think it's like 10 o'clock, and closes at 5, but that's when the party starts. Yeah. And it's like you party your butt off, you drink. I saw Rocky Patel this last year in the Venetian, was it the Venetian or was it the Palazzo Circle Bar? He grabbed Matt Booth by the legs, lifted him up, and he basically barrel raced him across the casino floor. Wow. I mean, it was phenomenal. But this is the camaraderie that we were talking about, the collegiality. Yeah, they're competitors, but dude, we're all friends. And it is, if you can just go and kind of hang out, you don't have to go to IPCPR to experience IPCPR. You can go as a consumer, go to New Orleans, go to Vegas, wherever it's at, hang out, watch the craziness unfold. And guys like Rocky, guys like Matt Booth, and, for better or for worse, guys like me, who are out there and we're having fun, handing out cigars, partying all day long, partying all night long. It's like this 4-day get together, be stupid, go home with stories type of event.
Yeah. Yeah, it was almost even worse. One of my classmates from college, oddly enough, is actually the Room 101 Davidoff Camacho brand manager.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I went to school with her at Full Sail in Orlando, and it was so weird because we all thought she was going to go work for like Louis Vuitton or somebody like that.
Are you talking about Courtney?
Yeah.
Oh, I love Courtney. She's great.
Yeah,
What's up, Courtney?
She's a very cool person. And so, I'm getting into cigars, and we didn't really talk a whole lot, right after college or anything. And then, about a year and a half later, I start seeing her with cigars, and I'm like, man, that's weird. She didn't smoke in college. So then I find out she's the brand manager over there, and I'm like, holy shit, how did that happen? So it's really kind of cool, and it's a small world,
It really is. And, her background, I don't think she intended to be in cigars either. I got a chance to talk to her for a little while, and we talked about the Camacho relaunch. And I think she had gone in a direction, because I think you're right. I think she was going in that direction of fashion and whatnot, but cigars pulled her in, and Davidoff. I mean, Davidoff is a luxury brand, right? I mean, It really is. It's a worldwide brand. It's more than just cigars. And for those of us who are in the cigar industry, sometimes it comes as a shock. Some of these brands kind of go beyond just the cigar lifestyle. But she brought a phenomenal sensibility of design and perfection, if you will, to those brands. And, again, tip of the hat to Courtney. She did a fantastic job, and she's fastidious with the details. And, cigars needs people like that. The cigar industry, which, I could go on and on and on. I mean, we're at 2 hours now. I'll give you another hour if you want. I could talk about just this one subject. But I was shocked when I first came into the industry, because again, I'm 35, so I grew up in the age of Nintendo. Well, first Atari, but Atari, Nintendo, Game Boy. I was on the internet on a Unix box, logging into BBS, looking at, ASCII porn, the whole thing, like, wow, those green boobs look really hot. I grew up in this age of like digital engagement, the internet, big data, if you will, the ability to know what's happening where, when, at the drop of a hat. And I, again, started this at a very young age, and I didn't know anything else. And then you get to some of these factories where they're producing literally, Dan, tens of millions of cigars, and they're doing it with chalkboards.
Right. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah. It blows me away. And then these guys are sitting around, and they're doing their marketing and branding, and they're like 50-year-old dudes who are in Central America who haven't got a clue about the U.S. market. They maybe know the European market, or maybe they know the Asian market, or maybe they have some experience with the U.S. market, but they're trying to create a brand, and they're trying to create an experience that, all they really have to go off of is what their dad did, or what they think is cool. And, again, internet access in Nicaragua is hard to come by, and it's very expensive. So being able to connect with the outside world and really be engaged, and, in informatics, and the ability to know what's going on where, and, where are we at with that bale of tobacco, and, who's going to buy this product, and being able to tie it all together. I was blown away that there are some factories, not all, the whole cigar industry isn't like this, but there are some factories that are, for better or for worse, they're in the Stone Age. Yeah. And there are some brands that were built in the Stone Age. And people like Courtney, guys that I've met all across the industry at the brand manager level, they're our age, man. I mean, they're coming into this thing going, this is a ripe opportunity to really drag these 50, 60, and 70-year-old guys into the modern age and say, hey, guys, cigar aficionado is very important. It's part of your strategy, but it's not your only strategy. Same thing with Cigar and Spirits, same thing with Cigar Snob. Look at what they have on the digital side. Don't just look at the publications. Like what do they have to offer on email? What do they have to offer on social media? What can you do in the forums? And I keep saying that, but it's very important. What about design sensibility? Does it have to be a brown box? Can we make it a blue box? Can we have a cool, interesting screen print? Can we do things that are different, wacky, wild, weird? yeah, there's a risk because you could be seen as too gimmicky, but when it's tempered, when our enthusiasm as younger, brand managers, and marketers is tempered with those guys who are in their 50s and 60s, and you can work together collaboratively, you can come out with something phenomenal. And stuff like what Courtney's done and some of the other stuff that I've seen, is proof positive that it works. I mean, look at Drew Estate. Look at Jonathan Drew, right? Like, he came out with acid, which is completely on the opposite side of the world when you look at what's in the humidor, especially 12 years ago, 10, 12, 14 years ago in that area. Now, it's not so different, right? It's flavored, but the branding, the messaging is not so different from some of the other brands that you might see out there.
Right.
So
it's familiar at the very least.
Absolutely. So again, we need people who are willing to take a chance, who have grown up in the digital age and are willing to apply what they know as with second nature to an industry who this whole thing is completely foreign to them. And it's a huge opportunity. So if you're in college and you're looking to make a splash, consider the cigar industry.
Yeah, and that's something I guess we can talk about because it's something that's, recently come onto my radar. I just maybe a week or two ago sat down with Miguel, and I wanted to pick his brain because it occurred to me, like, I don't see a lot of people, like Courtney, for example, that went to college with, no intention of working in the cigar industry and, just get into it or fall into it. It's very rare that I talk to somebody that happens to. You're another case of that. Everybody that I talk to, for the most part, they have a family member that grew up, rolling cigars, or they had a cousin that owned a tobacco field. It's a very family-oriented business. There's a lot of longevity within the industry community. And it's not something that's super easy to break into. You very much do have to know people in order to really even understand, where there are openings, where there's a need. And it tends to be a lot of the case of a created position, or you start somewhere and work your way up, but you start very low.
Right.
If, like you said, if we have somebody in college that's like, I think I might want to work in the cigar industry, I would tell them, just from my own experience, my very limited experience, you need to go out there and just start going to cigar shops and meeting people. Go to the events and make sure the guy knows your name when he leaves, whoever it is that's, running that event. Start to get to know people and be, just be friendly. Get to know people, get your name out there. But I guess what would you tell that guy in college or that woman in college, if they're interested in working in the cigar industry? How should they go about starting that?
Great question, man. I'm not sure that I'm the right guy to answer that. I stopped giving life advice a really long time ago when I realized my life was oftentimes a mess. But let me take a stab at it. I think in general, and we've touched on it several times. I mean, you got to be social. You got to be that guy. You don't want the guy. I'm not looking at a guy when I hire a person. I'm not looking at a guy who's got a 4.0 or 4.4 in college. Because that guy spent a lot of time with his head in books. He spent a lot of time in his dorm by himself, doing, studying to be whatever it is he wanted to be. I'm looking at a guy who, has maybe like a 2.8, but had a really good time in college.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're in a people business, man. We talked about Phillips and King as being a B2B company. Well, really, we're P2P. We're people to people. Businesses don't buy from us. People buy from us. And same thing on the B2C side. We don't sell to consumers. We sell to people. Yep. And we are people. I mean, it's too easy to get lost in the whole like branding thing and who Ventura Cigar is. It's like a big company. It's not. It's just a group of guys. And we're selling to a group of guys and gals. So, I want somebody first and foremost who's sociable, personable, likable, and is a problem solver. So, that guy right there, I want that guy. Now, as far as areas of study and that sort of stuff, I mean, I'm sure you could go to school and like get certified in agriculture. I know manufacturers. Nestor Plasencia went to school and he's an agronomist. He knows. I mean, the guy will blow you away. Nestor Plasencia Jr. He will blow you away with how much he knows about farming techniques, fertilization, sun. I mean, I could go on, but essentially he that's what he is. But he's also a really great personable dude. And he's able to sell and move tons and tons of cigars. Obviously knowing another language. If you know Spanish, I think that's the most obvious, right? You're going to be going into places where people don't necessarily speak English. So, being bilingual is good. However, there's this gigantic country on the other side of the world known as China. And they are snatching up cigars like crazy. And if you really want to get into cigars, knowing, Mandarin or Cantonese or some derivation, a dialect of an Asian language, could actually serve you quite well and really differentiate you, set you apart. But after that, understanding marketing and, branding, from where I sit, that's the most important. But being a good salesman or being a good businessman, let me say that, not necessarily salesman, but being a good businessman is very important. So, my background is in business. I ran a business for a while. But there are a lot of attorneys in the industry. Rocky Patel's an attorney. Charlie Tarano is an attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on. There's actually probably a dozen different guys who started out, by passing the bar, realize you can have a lot more fun and still use your education in the cigar industry. So, I say all that to say this: be personable, get some education underneath your belt, be able to talk to people, and be engaging. Speak another language, whether that be the language of Spanish or an Asian language, or just being able to speak at somebody else's level. That would go a really long way in getting into the cigar industry, or almost any other industry.
Yeah, that's applicable to everything.
Except for the medical field. I don't want a doctor, performing surgery on me who got a 2.8. I don't care how many beer bongs he cleared. I want that dude to have a 4.4. So.
You want your doctor to have studied, and you want your pilot to have done
that guy too.
But that's an absolutely interesting thing. I went to private schools my whole life growing up until college, and I had a lot of classmates that ended up being doctors and dentists and working in the medical field. Myself, I'm almost that guy that you talked about with the 2.8 until I got to college, because I went to, a very different college it was almost easy for me to get that really good GPA there, just because I enjoyed what I was doing so much that I was doing it outside of school. But in high school, it drove me crazy that they're giving me this math sheet with 100 of the same type of, problem to solve.
Oh, yeah.
I literally just refused to do that, because I was like, this is totally unnecessary and it's a huge waste of my time. So I'd spend my time reading books or researching things I was actually interested in. So I did well in the things that I was interested in and that were being taught by a teacher that kind of was on the same wavelength that I was on. But with things like, math and, some of the more advanced sciences, I just had no interest. So I would learn it to the point I thought it was, something I might use in my life. But, unfortunately that ended up, causing me to have a fairly low GPA. I think I did fairly well, to the point where I had something like a 3.2 or 3.4. I didn't do horrible. But I actually did, very, very well on my ACTs and SATs. I was lucky enough to go to private schools, like I had mentioned, so huge thanks to my mother. She really worked her ass off to send me to that school, and drove me an hour back and forth to school up until 6th grade. She really, really did an incredible job. But, you know, a 3.4, 3.6, you know, whatever it was that I ended up with in high school, you know, that's the equivalent of like, you know, straight A's in a public school.
Yeah, no kidding.
So when I took those, you know, those tests, I was, you know, way above what the normal student was taking it and did very well. And I'm a pretty even-keeled guy. I don't get real super excited or real super angry, hardly ever. But, you know, I'm a good test taker by nature. And, you know, that really did do a lot for me when I went to go to, you know, college. I unfortunately, threw away a full ride scholarship to a school. I was going to be a photographer, I thought, when I was finished with high school. I actually attended a college for one day.
No way.
Yeah, I attended Andrews University in Michigan for one day before I realized I don't want to own a photography shop and take, you know, high school graduation photos for a living.
It's probably a good call, man.
Yeah, it probably was, but, you know, I'm paying for it now with a massive student debt. Because
yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, it really does make life
across
difficult.
the U.S.
My tuition was like 65 grand, and as I talked about before, with the nature of where I went to school, where we're having, you know, 50-hour week classes, going to a class for 4 hours for a lecture and 4 hours for a lab 6 days a week, that doesn't leave a lot of room for work, and there were no dorms. So we had to take out a living expense loan as large as our tuition loan. Got real expensive living in Orlando, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But, you know, I absolutely did learn a lot. And, you know, as you can tell, I mean, Courtney, like you mentioned, we were in the same classes and kind of got the same education. You know, it's really valuable to go to college, and it's an interesting age where college isn't necessarily the same as it used to be. I tell a lot of people, if you go to a good tech school and get a good trade, whether it be in computers or engines, that's really just as valuable now as going to a regular traditional college.
Yeah, you know, I have a younger sister. Actually, I have two younger sisters. One's 17 and one's 14. And the 17-year-old is trying to figure out what she wants to do. And I have the same issue with my kids, right? I mean, they're obviously they're school age, but the thing that I keep harping on with all of them is, and the 5-year-old a little bit less because she's in kindergarten, but
Yeah.
I really push this with my 17 and 13-year-old sisters, which is like, look. Learn how to learn. Learn how to be flexible, because the next 25, 30 years, as you're, you know, entering your career and hitting your stride, there's going to be so many changes. Things are going to change every 5 years in the same way that things used to change once every 30 years. And if you can't be flexible and learn how to learn a new system, learn how to deal with new things and things coming at you faster than ever before, you will not do well. So whether that is you're in like a trade school or in a Ivy League university, if you come out of there inflexible, you will not do well in life. I guarantee it. And I've seen it. I've seen it in business when I hired employees and even myself, you know. The most successful people were the ones who were willing to flex with change, deal with things coming at them quickly, and, you know, and that's the best advice. Again, I'm terrible at giving life advice. So please don't take this.
You know,
I may be completely off base, but
so you don't have to give advice to technically give advice. Telling someone your life experience is almost the best advice that you can give, because experience isn't something that can be learned or taught. It's something that you have to go out there and get yourself. And the second best thing is hearing someone else's experience if you're of the mindset to take that in.
Yeah, exactly, and be willing to listen to those older guys, you know. And a cigar. Bring it back to cigars. A cigar shop's a phenomenal place to do that. If you're kind of in a funk in your career, if you're funk in your life or whatever, a girlfriend dumped you, a dog ran away, if you're a country song just waiting to happen, head on over to your local shop. And there's guys there, I guarantee you, there's guys there that have experienced what you're experiencing. And in a group of 5 guys, you'll get 12 different opinions on how to solve your problems.
Yeah.
But at the very least, you'll forget about your problems and you'll have a good time with it for sure.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that's so difficult for the youth of today that I see is there's a lot of anxiety. A lot of people really just forget to relax and forget to take a break. We're always so engaged with our computers and cell phones. You almost never get a break. And, obviously not everybody's going to go out into the desert and shoot guns. Not everybody's going to go out into the woods and hunt rabbits. But find something that you can do to, take a break, even if that's to go sit out in front of your house and smoke a cigar.
Sure. And developing like an expertise in a particular area is one of the most rewarding things you can do. I mean, when I was younger, this is going to date me a little bit, but when I was younger, like I used to build model airplanes.
Yeah.
So I would, you'd take time. I played sports. I played football. I was in wrestling. I was in soccer. I did all kinds of stuff, but taking a time to become an expert in a certain thing and, working with my hands, very meticulous, working with stuff like that and being proud of something, that is huge, man. I mean, I think the youth of today, I mean, again, I hate to do this because there's so many different types of people in so many different ways, but, they become experts at like Call of Duty and that sort of stuff, and that's great. But is that directly applicable to any other life skill, or can you take that with you when you go somewhere else? I don't know. I mean, building model airplanes, I didn't become a surgeon, so it really didn't like help me a whole lot, other than sniffing the glue, which was amazing. Because back in the day, that was good glue, and nowadays they have terrible glue. But being in a small room with all these like caustic chemicals and stuff like that, you go on some fantastic trips. And but I became an expert at that, and I eventually I threw away all my old models. But my folks were always like, I thought you were going to be an engineer, and I thought you were going to do this. But really, it was just a way for me to express a craft. It was something that I was good at, and there was a hobby shop, a half mile from my house. And the guy knew me by name, and I knew him, and he would recommend stuff. And he got me doing model airplanes, and then model cars, and model tanks, and model helicopters. Which don't ever do a model helicopter, man. It's like the worst experience ever. It's so hard. But again, being able to have a craft or a thing that you're an expert at, it can take some of that anxiety away.
So the one thing, like you mentioned, this is going to be really, really good for a lot of our listeners because we do spend probably too much time talking about video games on our show, because that's actually what drew me to go to the college that I went to. I wanted to work in the games industry. I learned later on that's a horrible place to work for the most part. But one of the things that a lot of those Call of Duty players, the people that go home and play every single day and they focus on getting as good as they can and, building models. I was very much into the tabletop gaming industry where you're, working with the fiddly models and the tiny little guys and the tanks and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure.
The dedication is the thing that you can absolutely apply to every facet of life. The time spent, the attention to detail, those are the things that you can transition to other parts of your life.
Absolutely, and I know I completely alienated your entire audience when I mentioned Call of Duty. So.
No. Well, I don't think you did at all. You made a really solid point. I mean, it's absolutely important to do the things you enjoy, but there's always too much of a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I am very much guilty of that, probably way more often than I should be. But, probably, so are most of us. But it's important to take that time for yourself and just, be aware. When you do take that time for yourself, realize, that is a piece of your life. And it's important to always do something that you enjoy, but it's also important to, once in a while put in the work and be in the trenches, as it were.
For sure. I was in college with a lot of different types of personalities, as we all are, right? And, I remember a couple guys that stood out, and I'm still acquaintances with them, not necessarily friends. And there were a lot of guys who were going to school who presumed that once they got out, they didn't have to work anymore. They're like, I'm putting in the time now in graduate school, so when I get out, I don't have to deal with any of these fools, and I can just kind of skate by on my, $70,000 worth of debt and, a few years in school. And I wasn't raised that way. I was raised, you work hard, you work every day. My pops, he worked, there was days where weeks where he would work 7 days a week because he owned a restaurant. And that's a commitment, man. That's a life commitment. And so I was raised in that environment, and I just kind of looked at him like, man, that's just not the way life is. And I don't want to preach here. I think I've gotten a little bit too preachy, but, when you're in school, whether you go to school, whether you take a job right out of, high school or whatever you end up doing, just work hard at it, man.
Yeah.
I would not have gotten to the point where I'm at, if it wasn't for a very select few people who, one, were huge supporters of mine, but two, they recognize that every day I'm working as hard as I possibly can. I'm putting in the time. I'm in there in the trenches. And we identify those people here at the office, and you see them out there every single day out there working. We want hard workers. We want guys who are putting in the time, the sweat equity, if you will.
Yeah.
Again, I've said it so many times. I don't give life advice, but here, kids, here's some life advice. Work hard, man.
Yeah.
Work hard. But that means you got to find the thing you really like. Find that one thing that is so, it's almost like you're not working. Find that one thing and then just do that.
Yeah, I forget who the quote is, but I just heard it yesterday, I think on the Joe Rogan podcast of all things.
I love Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, we could probably sit and talk about that for a few hours.
I'm a listener. If Joe's listening, Joe, I've been a listener since the snowflake days. I'm there. Red Band, I'm sorry, man. You get disrespected a lot of times, but it's mostly your fault. You're kind of a dork, but that's okay. We love you. But go on. I'm sorry.
So the quote that I heard was, pick a job doing something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's probably the most true thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot to be said for enjoying what you do. And when you enjoy, your work, it doesn't feel like you're working, and it's way easier to succeed. You still have to put in the time and the effort, but it doesn't feel like as much of a grind to you. If you're going to work every day and you feel like, oh my God, I have to go and do this again, you're essentially torturing yourself.
Yeah. That's when it's time to check out. You got to find something else.
Yeah, and I mean, there's absolutely the times when you need to, stick with it and put in the time, but it might be time to start looking for, a way out. You can't always just jump ship if you got, a family and kids, for those of us that do. You can't just jump ship, but you might want to start putting in that extra 10 hours a week looking for a new job or developing a new skill to find that new job.
I agree 100%.
But, so speaking of Red Band, this is a total tangent. There was just a Death Squad show in Indianapolis when I was there for our convention in October here.
That's cool.
I was going to go to it because I was really excited that I was going to be there and I'd be at, the convention all day working. And I was like, oh yeah, I can get out of work and I can go to the show 5 minutes from where our convention is. And then I found out the show didn't start until 11:45.
Nice.
And I had to be back at the convention at 6 a.m. And I'm like,
priorities, my friend.
Yeah, I'm like, I really want to go, but it's Red Band and not Rogan. If it was Rogan or Joey Diaz, I might go. But yeah, again, Red Band gets disrespected.
I love all those guys, and it's Red Band that really got Joe, and Joe says this every time there's a podcast that they talk about this, but he's like, hey, look, he got me into it.
Yeah.
And that's, again, it's one of those things where you got a guy who's kind of in this one mindset. You got this younger guy who's like, hey, we could do something kind of cool with this little bit of technology. We can make a huge impact. And they've grown that podcast.
And that was so early. I mean, they were in the early days. They were in not the super early days, but like 2005, I think they really started the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those earlier podcasts. I mean, we can go back in time, but the first podcast that I ever listened to and then became addicted to podcasting was The Revenge of the Screensavers, which eventually turned into Leo Laporte's Twit, This Week in Tech.
Yeah.
But if you can go back, I don't know if you guys are BitTorrent or Usenet freaks, but you could find those original like 10 episodes when it was called The Revenge of the Screensavers, and then of course the attorneys got involved. But that's when I realized like this podcast stuff, this is cool, and this is totally different. And, you know, Dan, I've been on the phone with you now for 2 hours and 35 minutes, and it's gone by in a flash. I'm sure your audience has fallen asleep 3 or 4 times, probably drank themselves into a stupor because it's so boring. But, you know, for those few people, those like 5 or 6 guys who can stand me for more than 15 minutes, this is probably, you know, this is a cool experience. And you can go long tail with stuff. You can really talk about all kinds of stuff, and there's not some guy on a mixing board or at the screens. You got to move it along. We got advertisers here. We got to get their time as well. You're really able to do these in-depth, long-form interviews that for those long tail guys, those niche guys, it's cool. And
yeah,
you know, that's what it represented to me, and I loved it. I latched on. I wish I could do what you do because you know I just. You know, my whole life's been wrapped up in work in those 3 things we talked about. But, yeah, I mean, you're kind of living the dream, bro.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's not even like it's so much that I have the time. It's just that I cut out one night a week of my life. You know, for the past year and some months, every single week I've made it like a job that I have to do. You know, like I said, I really enjoy it, so it's not like a job. But I'm faithful to it like a job where every week me and Andrew and Angela, except this is like the first week I think in a year that we haven't sat down on a Tuesday night or a Monday night and recorded a show because they're literally performing a play as we speak. You know, we just sit down and we smoke our cigars and we talk. And we all knew we're going to sit down and we're going to smoke cigars. But rather than play Call of Duty or something while we do it, we're going to record and have a conversation. And that's really the reason, you know, that you mentioned that I started a podcast rather than a blog or just a website. You know, obviously my first inclination as a web developer was to start a blog site or a review site. And then I got to thinking about it. I'm like, you know, you really can't put the depth into a blog post that you can a discussion. You can't explore and plumb the depths of a topic like you can in a podcast. There's really something to be said for talking directly back and forth. It gives you the ability to conversate on a level that you don't get in the mess that is a comment section on a blog post.
For sure.
You know,
for sure, but they all have their place, though. I mean, we love.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
I've mentioned Reddit before. Reddit. I've been a member of Reddit for 7 years now.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a really cool discussion board. I mean, it's so niche, like it's so like focused, right? But Reddit has both enriched and completely ruined my life in so many different ways.
Yeah.
But you know, and this was what's great about the internet in general, right? It's a conduit for what you want. Do you want audio for 3 hours about 2 guys talking about cigars and life? You want, you know, some crazy guys and trolls on 4chan and 8chan, 16chan, 32chan, whatever. Do you want a 4-page review on a Cuban seed Habano wrapper cigar that has got hints of cherry and leather? You just pick your topic and you can go for years on it. And
yeah,
I'm really fortunate to have grown up in this, you know, and seen it and be a part of it.
You know, and I'm kind of a study in what is the forum community. I really got into it at an early age, just like you did with the Linux box and such. The reason I was in Arizona for a year was I literally got a job on a forum board.
Oh, nice.
I was into tabletop gaming very heavily when I started my career out of college, and I was very much into Warhammer 40K, and I was on a board where you had to pay to be a member. It was like $20 a year or something, and they did a podcast along with it. And then as part of my job, I was like, oh yeah, I can help you guys out with your forum and, manage some of the WordPress stuff. And then I started doing a little bit of freelance web development for the guy that ran a business that was associated with it. Guitar Center at the time actually moved out to Westlake Village, California, out by you guys.
It's in my backyard.
Yeah. So when they moved out there, they said, hey, we'll, let you keep your job, but we're not going to give you a raise. So I wasn't about to move from a small town in the Midwest out to, California on the same salary. So I said, no.
Forget about it, bro.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that severance package is sounding pretty good now. And I had mentioned it in passing to the guy on the forums that I was working for freelance at the time, and it had been increasing more and more all the time to the point where I was working like 90 hours a week because I essentially was doing 2 jobs. And I said, hey, if you hear anything, if you've got any friends that might need a web developer, let me know. I need to pick up some extra work. And he said, you know what? Why don't you just come out here and, set up this new facet of the web business for me? So I was like, all right, I'm about to get married. It was a terrible, terrible transition time because I was literally getting married like the month that I found out that I was going to have to leave this job.
Oh, wow.
So I talked with my wife-to-be and said, hey, you want to move to Arizona? And she, reluctantly, after, being a pastor's daughter and moving around her whole life, was like, yeah, I guess so. Let's move. So we got married, and a week later we picked up and left right after the honeymoon and drove out with our 2 cars and what we could fit in them and lived in Arizona for a year. Unfortunately, the guy turned out to be a massive dickhead. In person. Yeah. So,
oh man, that's a bummer.
Yeah, the job itself was actually pretty solid. I enjoyed it. And I loved working in the industry. I would sit in the middle of a hobby shop and look at all the models and cases of beautifully painted figures every day and, write code and, talk with people in the industry. But at the end of the day, I could hear my boss screaming at his wife in the other room. And I could even hear him screaming at her from outside the building. So that turned out to be a very short-lived job because I just couldn't deal with it. And like I mentioned, we hated living in Arizona. But it was a great experience, essentially getting a job through a forum board. That's really not something you hear too often.
No, not enough.
And I guess it's like we were talking about. Find what you like to do, and you can always find a way to do it, one way or another. And it's just a matter of figuring out the best way to do it. So I've had you on here for about 2.5 hours. I think we probably should wrap things up because I know my wife probably wants some time without the baby.
No, that's great, man. She's holding down the kid. That's phenomenal. So tell her I really appreciate her giving up, a couple hours of her time for you and I to interact. That's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I had no idea you were going to be able to, dedicate so many hours to essentially just talking with me. I very much appreciate it. And you're always welcome to call in. You've got the phone number, and you're always welcome to Skype in if you're driving on a Tuesday night and you're like, you know what, I need to kill an hour while I drive. Give us a call, man. We record every single week on Monday or Tuesday night.
Fantastic. I'll take advantage of that for sure.
But before we go, I would appreciate it very much if you could tell people where they can find you and, a little bit about how they can go about finding Ventura Cigars other than just going to their local shop. How can they find out about you guys on the web? How can they see your stuff?
Yeah, so of course we have a website, it's venturacigar.com. That's probably the best place to go for all things VCC. There you can learn about the blends, the brands, kind of the process, which we're improving right now, that page is not that great. But you can also learn about events. We do about 100, maybe 110 events every year all over the country. We have reps in all the major markets, a lot of the minor markets as well. So go there first, and then from there spread out. You can see we're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Reddit. Our username is Ventura Cigar on Reddit. And then, what I'd like to do is I'd like to give a huge shout out to my crew, the people that support me here every day. Obviously, this isn't a one-man show. So, Brittany Peliquin, I know you're listening. Thank you so much. She's my social media guru, my Sherpa that helps me kind of walk up these treacherous mountains every day.
Right.
And then, of course, I want to, scream out to, I have to scream because the guy's mostly deaf, El Diablo Blanco. You know who you are. You keep being the short little white devil you are. And, of course, all my guys out there in the field who are, slinging cigars every single day, the arrows in the back for me and the things that I screw up on. So this is a team effort, and you guys want to, learn about us, find us on the web, scream at us on social media, let us know what we're doing right, let us know what we're doing wrong, and I promise you we'll get better as we go along.
Yeah, and we'll absolutely continue, posting about you guys on Facebook, on Twitter. If anybody has any questions and for whatever reason you can't get a hold of them directly, send it over to us and we can absolutely get in contact and, figure out whatever you guys need. But, we'll get you, I'll have to get you on Facebook so we can add you to our group.
For sure.
You're always welcome to post up stuff there. Let people know what's coming, let people know what's going on. And anytime you have a need to get cigars out there for people to review, or you want an opinion on something, let us know and we're happy to get you in contact with some people, and we're always happy to, let you guys know what we think. If anything, we are honest to a fault.
Perfect.
But, I very much appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, and thanks out there to you guys who were listening to me the whole time. You really are the champions. You really are what make Ventura Cigar Ventura Cigar.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I really look forward to getting back to our usual cadence and our usual show times. Once November hits here next week, we'll absolutely be back with our regular show, and we're going to be adding a new permanent co-host to the show starting next week. My buddy Zach, or Zero is what we call him, he will be on the show pretty much for as long as we can tell. He's actually moving here on Monday night from Maryland. So, Zero, if you're listening on the drive, have a safe trip, man, and we'll see you on Monday. And you guys have a great week.